The rain had been falling for hours, thin, unbroken lines glistening in the parking lot as Officer Jamie Hunt sloshed across the cracked asphalt toward the old patrol car. She'd drawn the short straw that night. Midnight shift, solo patrol, and not in her usual cruiser. The department's new fleet of SUVs were in the shop for upgrades, so the desk sergeant had tossed her the keys to the Relic, a 1973 Plymouth Fury the town council liked to roll out for parades and community fairs. Supposedly, it was good PR. Tonight it just meant wet vinyl seats, a sticky window crank, and a heater that coughed up dust. Jamie ducked behind the wheel, shaking the rain from her cap. She slid the keys into the ignition and turned. The old V8 rumbled to life, dashboard lights flickering to a weak green. She exhaled, glancing at the retrofitted laptop wedged between the seats, a rare concession to modernity. On the dash sat a squat, boxy radio, chrome buttons, faded dials, the kind her grandfather used to talk about. No one had bothered to remove it. It hadn't picked up anything but static in decades. She put the car in gear and eased onto Main Street, the wipers smearing water in lazy arcs. The town was silent, stores shuttered, only the neon of the all-night diner reflected in puddles. Jamie's route took her past the darkened school, over the one-lane bridge, and through the leafy maze of Maple Avenue. She checked in with dispatch. Routine stuff, all clear, nothing stirring but the weather. The first hour passed quietly. Jamie settled into the rhythm of a small-town night watch, eyes on porches, scanning for stray pets or teenagers out past curfew, listening to the hum of rain on metal. She ran plates on the laptop, sipped gas station coffee gone lukewarm, and fiddled with the stubborn window until it finally cracked open for air. At the red light on Oak and Fifth, Jamie leaned back, letting the heater groan. She eyed the old radio, wondering what it must have been like, back before GPS and encrypted channels. Out of curiosity, she thumbed the volume dial. The speaker hissed, then fizzled, just static. As always, she turned it off with a shrug. It was well past 2 a.m. when the night changed. She'd just finished her loop and was rolling down Sycamore, one of the oldest streets, lined with sagging Victorians and elms, when the radio, dead for years, crackled to life. Unit 3, come in. Unit 3, respond. Robbery in progress. Smith's drugstore. Suspect is a white male, last seen in a blue Mercury, northbound on Pine. Officer needs backup. Repeat, needs backup at Smith's drugstore. Over. Jamie's hands froze on the wheel. The voice was sharp and fast, every word clipped in that old-fashioned movie reel cadence. She stared at the radio, heart pounding. She'd heard dispatchers talk, even joke, about phantom signals before, CB nuts and pranksters messing around late at night. But this felt different. The static had cleared. The message was unmistakably urgent, as if it were breaking through from somewhere else. She glanced at her laptop, but the modern dispatch log showed nothing. No calls, no alerts, not even a weather advisory. Jamie grabbed the mic for her main radio. Central, this is 213. I just picked up a strange signal on the old car radio. Sounded like a robbery in progress at Smith's drugstore. Do we have anything on that? Central came back, puzzled. Negative, 213. All quiet tonight. Are you sure? We don't have a Smith's drugstore on file anymore. Hasn't been one in town since the 70s. You all right out there? Jamie stared at the street, watching the rain streak down the windshield. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, flicked her eyes back to the old radio. Nothing but a faint hum now, like the tail end of a signal winding away. I'm okay, she replied, her voice unsteady. Might have just been static. I'll keep rolling. Copy that. Stay safe, Jamie. She took a slow breath, trying to shake the chill running through her. A prank, she decided. Maybe an old recording picked up on the airwaves. She glanced at the side streets. Empty, silent. The past felt close, pressing in behind the rain and the yellow sweep of headlights. But her curiosity gnawed at her. Smith's Drugstore, blue Mercury sedan. Officer needs backup. She pulled over and tapped a search into her phone, but only found faded newspaper clippings and a few lines in the Historical Society's blog. Smith's Drugstore had closed in 1977, and there'd been a notorious armed robbery there in the 50s. She read, "Suspect fled in a blue Mercury. Officer down. Case never solved." Jamie sat back, rain tapping the roof, the radio silent once more. She watched the reflection of the old storefronts in the water and wondered, if she drove down Pine, would she find the past waiting for her, or just another empty street, washed clean by years of rain and the lonely hours before dawn? Jamie sat parked under the dim orange glow of a street lamp, the wipers keeping up a slow, anxious rhythm. She should have called it in as a technical glitch and continued her patrol, but she couldn't get the old dispatcher's voice out of her head. Urgent, desperate, as if the crisis was still unfolding somewhere just out of sight. She let her fingers tap nervously on the wheel, replaying every detail in her mind. Smith's Drugstore, blue Mercury sedan. Officer needs backup. She pulled up the GPS on her phone and typed in Smith's Drugstore, but the results came up empty, except for an old black and white photo in a local history post. The building was gone, but the blog listed the original address, 211 Pine Street. Jamie's gaze shifted down Pine, a stretch of cracked pavement lined with shadows and rain-slicked brickwork. The place was less than 4 blocks away. With a quick check of her mirrors, she put the Fury in drive and rolled down the nearly deserted street, her own headlights painting the old facades with watery light. The town's heart had moved out to the bypass years ago, leaving these blocks behind. Abandoned shops with boarded windows, faded signs half swallowed by ivy, puddles shining where the sidewalk had broken and settled. Her radio stayed silent, both the modern set and the vintage one. All she could hear was the creak of the car's suspension and her own uneasy breathing. 211 Pine was a weed-choked lot now, bracketed by an auto repair shop and the shell of a bakery. Jamie eased to a stop at the curb, engine idling, hands curled tight on the wheel. She scanned the scene, searching for anything. A car, a flash of movement, a silhouette in a doorway. There was nothing but the steady drum of rain and the hiss of tires as a late delivery van splashed past. She flicked off the ignition and listened. The night pressed in close, heavy and old, carrying the scent of wet concrete and decaying leaves. For a moment, she thought she heard something beneath the storm, the echo of shouting, the slam of a door, maybe even gunshots. But it faded into the wash of rain before she could be sure. Her skin crawled, goose flesh prickling along her arms. The street felt steeped in memory, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Jamie clicked on her flashlight and stepped out, boots squelching in a puddle. She made her way to the edge of the lot. The weeds brushed her shins, wet and cold. The foundation of the old store was still there, a cracked rectangle of concrete slick with moss. She swept the beam around, illuminating shards of brick and a rusted metal pipe poking from the mud. She bent down, brushing dirt from a patch of glass, and for a split second, she could almost see the past. Lights blazing in the windows, a Coca-Cola sign glowing red, shadows of people running inside. A shiver went through her, and she stepped back, blinking hard. "You're letting this get to you," she muttered, but her heart kept racing. She made a slow circuit of the foundation, looking for anything out of place. half expecting to find old bullet casings or a lost badge, but there was only rain and the wind whispering in the grass. She was about to call it in when the radio flared again. This time, the voice was sharp with fear. Different dispatcher, or maybe just panic showing through. Unit 3, officer down at Smith's. Suspect fleeing in a blue Mercury. Last seen headed west on Harrison. All units respond. Repeat. Officer down at Smith's drugstore. Jamie's breath caught. The sound quality was tinny, distant, with static threading every word, but it was unmistakable. She grabbed the old mic, pressing the transmit button. Unit 3, this is Officer Hunt. Do you read? Repeat. This is Officer Hunt. I'm at Smith's drugstore. What's your status? Her voice sounded strange and hollow, swallowed by the old equipment. No answer. The modern radio was dead silent. The dispatch laptop frozen mid-refresh. Jamie felt isolated. The present and past tangled together in the humid, haunted air. She looked down Harrison, just a strip of old asphalt and flickering streetlights. The whole block felt suspended in time. Her phone buzzed, finally a signal, but it was only an automated weather alert. Warning of thunderstorms. No help from Central. No news from any real, living soul. Jamie got back in the car, heart pounding, and sat gripping the wheel. She listened, willing the radio to come alive again, half afraid of what she might hear next. She watched the empty lot through fogging glass, wondering if something would appear. A ghostly sedan, blue and roaring, a shadow dashing across the street, the whole town spinning backward for just a moment, to that long-ago night. Nothing came. The rain eased up, the streetlights buzzed, and the sense of urgency slowly ebbed, leaving Jamie breathless and alone. Finally, she put the Fury in gear, and rolled away, the old patrol car groaning, as it slipped into the night. But as she glanced in the rear view, she thought she saw, for the briefest instant, the pale flash of a uniform, and a dark car idling in the rain, right where Smith's drugstore had once stood. She blinked, and it was gone, just shadows and water, memories leaking through the static, the airwaves, and the old bones of the town. Back in the warmth of the old Fury, Jamie's hands trembled on the wheel. The town outside felt even quieter now, as if the whole place was listening, waiting for the next crackle from the radio, the next clue from a time long vanished. She checked her modern patrol radio one more time. Nothing, not a squawk from Central, not even the hum of static. The digital screen on the dash glowed blue and lifeless, clock frozen at 3:12 a.m. She flicked the ignition, half hoping everything would snap back to normal. Instead, the old patrol car seemed to settle deeper into the night, the heater wheezing, windows fogging at the corners. She tried to shake the sense of unreality. It had to be a hoax, an old tape or CB buff messing around, maybe some kind of freak atmospheric skip. But as she drove, curiosity gnawed at her. The dispatcher's voice had been too urgent, the details too specific. Officer down, blue Mercury, Harrison Street. Jamie found herself rolling west, slow and watchful, as if the past might emerge from the rain at any moment. As she neared the old intersection where Harrison cut across the railroad tracks, the night seemed to press closer. The houses here were small, faded, front porches sagging, windows black. At the crossing, she stopped and let the engine idle, wipers thumping out a slow heartbeat. That's when the radio spoke again. This time, the static was nearly overwhelming, waves of white noise and faint music bleeding through. But underneath it, voices broke through, frantic, overlapping, nearly lost to time. Shots fired. Officer down. Repeat. Officer down. Suspect fleeing north. All units. Urgent. Shots. A burst of gunfire, eerily crisp, cut through the static. Jamie jolted, adrenaline surging. She stared at the radio, heart slamming in her chest, as another voice, Higher, desperate, pleaded. Somebody, please help. Officer Barton, he's hit. He's bleeding bad. Jamie's skin crawled. Barton. The name rang a faint bell. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and thumbed frantically through the local history blog again. There, a grainy photo, a caption, Officer Walter Barton, wounded in the line of duty during the 1955 Smith's drugstore robbery. The suspect was never caught. Barton died at the hospital, leaving behind a wife and daughter. A chill prickled along Jamie's spine. She stared out through the steamed-up windshield at the empty intersection, trying to picture how it looked 70 years ago. She tried the mic again, voice wavering. This is Officer Hunt. Can anyone hear me? Is anyone there? For a moment, there was nothing. Then, impossibly, a voice replied, hoarse, thick with pain. Unit 3. Anyone? Barton. We're losing him. Need help. There was a crash, then silence, and a long, hollow burst of static that seemed to fill the entire car. Jamie's heart hammered. She reached for the ignition, almost ready to flee, when headlights flashed suddenly through the rain. Her breath caught. A car, large, blue, old-fashioned, lurched through the intersection, tires spraying water. For a split second, she could see a face behind the wheel, pale, tense, eyes wild with fear. The Mercury roared past, then was gone, swallowed by darkness. For an instant, Jamie thought she heard footsteps on the wet pavement, a man running, calling out. She strained to see, but the block was empty. Just the distant sound of a train and the pulse of her own heart in her ears. She sat back, stunned. The Fury's radio was silent now, but her own mind buzzed with 1,000 questions. Was she seeing the past? Was the town itself replaying a tragedy that had never been solved? A low beeping finally broke the spell. Her modern radio blinked to life, the digital clock jumping ahead by 15 minutes, as if time itself had snapped back into place. Unit 213. Status check. Officer Hunt. Do you copy? Jamie fumbled for the mic. I'm here. I'm fine. Just engine trouble. Lost radio for a while. She hesitated, unsure how much she could admit without sounding crazy. Did you ever hear of Officer Barton? There was a pause on the other end. Then dispatch replied, he's in the honor roll at the old station. Why? Jamie shook her head, unable to explain. Just wanted to know. All clear now. She let the car idle, watching the street, the memory of gunshots and desperate voices ringing in her ears. The blue Mercury, the name Barton, the echo of tragedy long past. She wondered if the old patrol car had become a bridge, if only for a single night, between her lonely rounds and a ghost still waiting for backup. She drove on, but every glance in the rear view showed her only the slick black street, the rain, and her own wide-eyed reflection, alone but changed, listening now for the whispers of history that sometimes ride the storm. The old patrol car drifted through the town's sleeping streets, the heater's feeble warmth unable to chase away the chill crawling up Jamie's spine. She passed shuttered storefronts and puddle-soaked sidewalks, each shadow holding more meaning now. The night felt charged, as if it vibrated with echoes only she could hear. She was haunted by what she'd heard, by what she'd almost seen. The blue Mercury, the frantic voices, Barton bleeding out on a rainy street. The Fury's radio stayed stubbornly silent, but Jamie couldn't stop thinking about the names, the addresses, the sense that time itself was thinner tonight. She circled the block once more, then parked along the curb at the old intersection. Harrison Street was empty, just streetlights shining in lonely pools and rain running in silver rivulets toward the gutter. She rolled down the window and listened. For a few seconds, all she heard was the hiss of the tires cooling, the patter of raindrops on metal, and her own tense breathing. She pulled the faded photo of Officer Barton from her phone, studying his steady gaze. She wondered what he'd felt on that night. Did he sense something was off before he stepped out into the storm? Did he believe backup would come, or did he already know that some calls echo unanswered forever? A sudden coldness swept through the car. Jamie stiffened, the windshield clouded, and in the fog, faint shapes took form. A figure running, a flash of a uniform, the blurred suggestion of an old police badge. She rubbed her eyes. The vision faded, but a pressure remained, like the weight of eyes, like expectation. The radio popped. Jamie flinched, gripping the wheel. At first only static, then just beneath the surface, the faintest cry. Harrison and Pine need backup. Please, anyone. She grabbed the microphone, her voice barely steady. Barton, is that you? I'm here. I hear you. Silence. Then a desperate whisper. Don't let him get away. Jamie's heart hammered. She peered through the rain, searching for the past leaking through. She stepped out, boots splashing, and walked to the center of the intersection. The world felt layered, her present overlaid with some other, flickering reality. The night pulsed thunder in the clouds, a far-off train, the throb of her own blood. A wave of dizziness swept through her, and for a heartbeat, everything shifted. She blinked. The street was gone, replaced by a brighter, crisper world. Neon lights blazing, the old Smith's drugstore sign lit up, the air charged with voices. Sirens howled. She saw a blue Mercury skidding around the corner, saw a uniformed man collapse in the rain, saw Barton's face, eyes wide with pain. Jamie shouted, "Stop him!" The figure behind the Mercury's wheel looked straight at her, into her, and for an impossible second, his face twisted in shock. The scene snapped back. Jamie stood alone in the intersection. The modern town returned, but her chest ached with grief, and her mouth tasted of gunpowder and adrenaline. She hurried back to the car, shivering. The radio spat out one last message, barely audible. "Thank you, badge 213. Jamie stared. That was her badge number. The chill danced down her spine. Had Barton known she was coming? Had he been waiting all these years for someone, anyone to answer the call? She fumbled open the glove box, needing something tangible to hold onto. Inside, beneath a pile of unused report forms and an old flashlight, she found a flat leather wallet. She flipped it open and stared in disbelief. Inside was a police badge, tarnished but real, the numbers worn but unmistakable. 213. On the back, scratched into the leather, was a date: April 3rd, 1955. Jamie ran her fingers over the numbers, the cold metal burning against her skin. She wasn't sure if she'd been meant to find it, or if, by answering the call, she'd become part of the story herself. She sat in the silence, rain blurring the world outside. In the dim reflection of the window, her face seemed to blend with Barton's old photo. Two officers, separated by decades, connected by static and sorrow. The town itself felt different now, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath for 70 years. As dawn approached, Jamie finally put the Fury in gear. Badge 213 clutched tight in her hand. She knew she'd never hear the old dispatch again, not in this life, but she also knew she'd never pass this intersection, never answer a radio call without listening for voices from the past, hoping that somewhere, somehow, the backup had finally come. Dawn came slow and grey, mist rising from the empty streets. As Jamie drove the old Fury back toward the station, the radio, both the crackling antique and her modern set, stayed silent, as if the whole world had been reset, the past finally letting go. But she kept the badge in her palm, cold and impossibly heavy, a connection to that night in 1955 that she still wasn't sure she'd imagined. Her mind circled the memory, Barton's desperate voice, the flash of the blue Mercury, the impossible sense of being seen, even for a heartbeat, by someone long dead. She parked behind the station, engine ticking. As it cooled, nobody was there to greet her, At the end of shift, just the sleepy desk sergeant, finishing paperwork, who barely looked up as she stepped inside, rain dripping from her jacket. "Anything happen?" he asked, yawning. Jamie hesitated. She thought of the radio calls, the voices, the badge. "Nothing the report would understand," she said finally, offering a tired smile. She sat at her desk with the badge laid in front of her. The old leather cracked and faded, the numbers 213 just barely visible. She checked the personnel records in the digital archive. Officer Walter Barton's file was still there. A hero's picture, a list of commendations, a brief note about his death in the line of duty. There was no mention of his badge ever being found, nothing about the Blue Mercury, only a reference to unsolved circumstances and the sadness of a department that had lost one of its own. Jamie ran her thumb over the date scratched on the leather. April 3rd, 1955. That was the night of the robbery. That was the call the radio had played, again and again, until someone answered. She stared at the computer screen, half expecting to find her own name listed somewhere, an impossible link bridging the years. But the past remained stubbornly silent, except for what she'd carried back with her. The badge, the memory, the sense of having crossed some invisible line. For the rest of her shift, she felt a strange calm. The ache of worry and confusion faded, replaced by a gentle gratitude. She left the badge in her locker, wrapped in a soft rag, and drove home as the sun broke over the horizon, lighting the wet streets and the old storefronts in gold. In the days that followed, Jamie kept listening. She patrolled her usual routes. The Fury retired again to the garage. Whenever she passed the intersection of Harrison and Pine, she slowed down, windows open, ears tuned to every hint of static. Sometimes at midnight, she'd hear a distant pop from the old car's radio, a voice nearly lost, a snatch of music from another time, the faintest cry for help. And never again did she hear Barton, or the desperate dispatcher, or the gunshots ringing out through the storm. She did tell the story once, over pie and coffee at the all-night diner, to another officer who'd once confided his own strange shift on a foggy night. He listened without mocking her, nodding at the right places, and when she finished, he asked only one question: "Do you think he knows you were there?" Jamie nodded. "I think so." Maybe that's all he needed. They drank in silence, the hum of the neon sign outside matching the hush of the pre-dawn street. She thought of Barton's last words, the gratitude in the old dispatch. "Thank you, badge 213. The town had a way of swallowing its secrets, but sometimes when the night was quiet and the rain fell just right, the past pressed close, asking not to be forgotten. Months later, Jamie found herself called to a community event at the local museum. They'd set up a display honoring the department's history, old uniforms, sepia-toned photos, the battered remains of the original dispatch log. She slipped Barton's badge into a glass case, beneath a faded newspaper clipping about the Smith's drugstore robbery. The curator thanked her, fingers lingering on the scratched numbers. "I thought it was lost forever," the curator said. Jamie smiled. Some things wait until the right person's listening. As she left the museum, she caught her reflection in the window. A police officer, modern uniform. But for a moment the lines blurred. She thought of that long, strange night, the impossible dispatch, the flash of the Mercury's headlights, and the moment when the voices of the lost had crossed time to reach her. Later, when Jamie patrolled in a new SUV, she sometimes glanced at the radio, half hoping for the old static, the clipped call sign, a voice out of history calling her badge number, as if she'd always belonged to that moment in 1955. The town was quieter, somehow, since that night. Some mysteries remained, but the air felt lighter. She kept a copy of Barton's picture in her glove box, and every time rain streaked the windshield, and the streets emptied, she listened, not just for trouble, but for echoes, for old debts paid, for the peace that comes when someone finally answers the call. And if, Some lonely night, the restored Fury's radio ever crackled back to life. Jamie would be ready. Some stories, she knew, never really end. They just wait for the right frequency and the right heart to tune in. The woods pressed in on all sides, dense and dark beneath a sky the color of lead. Mark Halter paused at the bend in the trail, letting the rain drip from his jacket and run in cold lines down his neck. His radio crackled static in his hand, but the search commander's voice had faded long ago, replaced by the distant hush of wind in the pines and the slow, persistent beat of water falling on dead leaves. He stared at his map, the edges already soft with damp, and tried to match the tangled lines to the ground in front of him. It was the 5th day of the search for Jacob Reese. The missing posters were taped to every shop window in town. 13 years old, blonde, blue-eyed, last seen riding his bike on the old quarry road. People said the land out here was strange. Maps disagreed, roads changed names, and sometimes the woods seemed to move, swallowing up hunters and hikers alike. Mark had grown up hearing those stories, and he'd laughed them off, until now. He'd volunteered out of guilt as much as hope. Mark wasn't a cop, not a parent, not even someone who knew Jacob, but he'd seen the mother on the news, heard her voice break, and something in him had stirred. He was here for the same reason as the rest, a need to believe that sometimes people came home. The main search teams were working the riverbanks, a mile north. Mark's group had been sent to check a patch of logging trails far outside the usual range, just to be thorough. They'd split up 2 hours back. Radio contact promised every 30 minutes, but the storm was killing the signal, and the forest maze of ridges and gullies played tricks on both compass and mind. Mark wiped his face, studied the map again, and frowned. He should have come out by the railroad grade by now, but the ground only sloped deeper into shadow, the trees crowding closer, branches catching his jacket and tugging at his pack. He checked his phone, no bars. He almost turned back. Then he saw it, a narrow path splitting off from the main track, nearly lost under moss and old needles, veering right toward a stand of ancient birches. It wasn't marked on his map. Something about it felt odd, out of place, but it was cover from the wind, and in the failing light, any new road felt like progress. He hesitated, then swung his flashlight beam down the path and pushed on, boots squelching in the sodden earth. After a few hundred feet, the trail began to change. The undergrowth grew sparse, the birches giving way to dark, looming oaks that seemed far older than anything else in the forest. The air grew still and thick. The rain suddenly muted, as if he'd passed into another world. Mark's heart beat faster, not in fear, exactly, but with the unease of being watched, of trespassing somewhere he wasn't meant to be. He almost missed the house. It stood at the edge of a shallow ravine, set back in a hollow ringed by blackened trees. 2 stories, gabled roof, the wood siding worn to silver by years of rain and wind. Mark blinked, then checked the map again, certain he'd made a mistake. No houses were marked anywhere near here. This was supposed to be unbroken forest, state land, yet there it was, every detail sharp in the gloom, glass gleaming in the windows, a faint line of smoke curling from the chimney. He moved closer, boots crunching in the wet leaves. The house was strangely intact, not abandoned or ruined as he might have expected, but clean. Lights glowed in the windows, a soft golden warmth that made his skin prickle. For one wild moment, Mark thought maybe he'd stumbled onto a hunting camp or some off-grid cabin, but the porch was swept, the door painted a deep, glossy blue. There was no car, no footprints, not even the prints of deer or raccoons in the mud. It felt waiting. He called out, voice trembling, "Hello, anyone here?" "I'm with the search team. Is anyone inside?" No answer, just the sound of rain, and somewhere deep in the woods, the distant bark of a dog. Mark circled the house, calling Jacob's name. The back of the house was even stranger. An ornate iron fence curved around a tiny weedless garden, roses blooming, despite the cold, petals beaded with rain. A child's swing hung from a low branch, gently swaying in the wind, though the air itself was still. He returned to the front, dread pooling in his gut. He hesitated, then knocked, hard, letting his flashlight thump the wood. The sound echoed, too loud, as if the walls were hollow. Still no reply. Mark tried the knob. The door swung open, smooth on oiled hinges. Inside, the air was warm, faintly sweet, and filled with the gentle ticking of a dozen clocks, all set to different times. The entryway was neat. A coat rack holding a bright red raincoat, a pair of boots too small for any adult, an umbrella dripping into a ceramic pot. There was a photograph by the door, a boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, smiling wide, standing in front of this very house. Mark stepped inside, heart pounding, the impossible question ringing in his mind. How could there be a house here, one that no map, no searcher, no memory in town had ever found? And if Jacob Reese was anywhere, was it possible he'd been waiting inside all along? Mark stood motionless just inside the threshold, listening to the clocks and his own breath rasping in the hush. The warmth in the entryway was disorienting. A soft golden light spilled from shaded lamps in rooms just out of view, glowing on wallpaper patterned with faded flowers. He wiped his boots on the mat by reflex, glancing down at the red raincoat and boots so small they could only belong to a child. "Hello," he called again, forcing his voice steady. "It's Mark Holter. I'm with the search party. I'm looking for Jacob Reese. Is anyone here?" Silence answered him, but not emptiness. Something about the air inside felt charged, as if the house itself was holding its breath, listening. He moved carefully down the hall, shining his flashlight into each room. The parlor to the left was spotless, lined with shelves of old books and toys, a wooden train, a box of jacks, a battered teddy bear perched on a velvet armchair. The clocks in here all showed different times, hands ticking backward and forward, some frozen at impossible hours. The scent was sweet, like vanilla and old linen, mixed with something floral and strange. He glanced at the mantelpiece and saw more photographs, some sepia, some recent, all of people he didn't know. No adults, only children, all smiling, posed in front of the house, the swing, the iron fence outside. Mark's skin prickled. Something about their eyes felt too bright, their smiles too wide, as if they were trying to communicate something just out of reach. He called out again, louder, "Jacob, it's Mark. Are you here?" He moved into the next room, a kitchen, warm and bright, the table set for tea. 2 cups, one small, one large, sat steaming, as if someone had just left. A plate of cookies, sugary and perfect, rested between them, untouched, except for a single bite, taken from one. The bite mark was small, child-sized. A sudden, soft sound startled him, a faint scuff of movement from upstairs. Mark's heart hammered as he turned and started up the staircase, boots creaking on the runner. The walls were lined with more photos, children at different ages, all with different families, different decades, but always with that same too bright house in the background. At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched into shadows, doors closed along each side. He moved to the first door and knocked. "Jacob, my name's Mark. Your mom and dad are looking for you." No answer, but he heard the gentle, unmistakable sound of someone breathing, slow and even, just beyond the wood. He tried the knob, and the door opened without a sound. The room was a child's bedroom, neat and bright, the bed neatly made, with a patchwork quilt. A small figure sat on the window seat, gazing out into the woods, his face hidden behind a mop of blonde hair. He wore jeans, a red hoodie, and rain boots spattered with mud. Mark's throat went dry. Jacob, the boy turned, blue eyes, wide and clear, blinked at Mark with surprise, then relief. "Are you from town?" His voice was soft, perfectly calm, as if Mark's presence was only mildly interesting. "Yes," Mark managed. "I've been looking for you. Everyone has. Your parents are worried sick." He knelt by the window seat, careful not to spook him. "How did you get here, Jacob? How long have you been inside?" Jacob looked past him, at the ticking clocks down the hall. "I was riding my bike, and it got cold. I saw the house. The lady let me in." He frowned, brow crinkling. "But I wanted to go home. Every time I tried, I ended up back in the same place. Sometimes I heard people calling my name, but I couldn't find the door." Mark felt a chill in his gut. "The lady, is she here?" Jacob shook his head. "She said she was going to get more tea. She always does. Sometimes she talks to the clocks." Mark swallowed, searching the room for signs of harm or distress, but Jacob seemed healthy, if strangely calm. "You know your mom and dad have been looking for you for days." Jacob's expression clouded. "It hasn't been that long," he said. "She said it's still the same day." He looked out at the woods again. "But I'm tired. I want to go home." Mark nodded, fighting the sense of unreality closing in on him. "Okay, we'll go now, together. You stay close to me, all right?" They left the room hand in hand. The house was silent, except for the clocks, which seemed to tick louder now, some in reverse, their rhythms weaving an uneasy song through the hall. As they passed the kitchen, Mark glanced back. The tea had gone cold, the cookies untouched, the parlor was darker, the toys gone from the shelves. When they reached the door, Mark pulled it open. The outside air rushed in, sharp and cold, carrying the scent of rain and pine. For a moment, he felt resistance, as if the threshold itself did not want to let them pass. Then Jacob squeezed his hand, and together, they stepped out. The woods were waiting, darker than before, but somehow more real. Mark looked back, half expecting to see the house vanish or change, but it was still there, windows glowing, the door gently closing behind them, as if watching and waiting for whoever might stumble by next. Mark kept a firm grip on Jacob's hand as they crossed the soggy yard, both of them flinching at the sense that the house was watching, or listening, or perhaps only waiting. The garden's perfect roses gleamed with rain, petals unbruised despite the gloom, and the swing on the low branch was motionless now. No wind, no ghostly push. Mark glanced back at the front door. It stood closed, but the golden light in the windows seemed to pulse, dimmer with every step they took away. He tried to orient himself. The woods looked different, the sky barely lighter than the ground, but at least the air outside felt real, wet, chilly, full of distant bird song, and the sharp scent of pine. Mark dug out his map, heart pounding. He traced their route, but nothing matched. The path they'd come down wasn't there, and the lines of old logging roads looked wrong, blurred by water and time. Jacob stumbled, and Mark knelt, squeezing the boy's shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I'm tired," Jacob whispered. His eyelids drooped, and he blinked hard. "My legs feel weird, like they forgot how to walk." Mark tried to smile. "We'll go slow. As long as we keep moving, we'll find the others. The searchers must be close." They pressed on, Mark guiding them through the undergrowth. He tried the radio, but only static answered him. No voices, no comforting squawk of another searcher's call sign. The woods seemed to close in tighter, branches tangling over the path. Every now and then, Mark thought he heard footsteps behind them, or the creak of a door, but whenever he turned, there was only the rustle of wind in the leaves. "Did you see the lady?" Jacob asked after a while. His voice was so soft Mark almost missed it. "No," Mark replied. "Who was she?" Jacob chewed his lip, brow furrowed, as if struggling to remember a dream. "She looked nice, but her eyes were wrong. She smiled a lot. Sometimes she talked to the clocks, and said the house got lonely." He shivered. "She said people come when they're lost, and if they're nice,
The house lets them stay. A chill snaked down Mark's spine. He squeezed Jacob's hand tighter, mind racing. The house lets them stay. The photographs on the wall, the toys, the red coat by the door, the two bright smiles of children. He looked back again, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a curtain move, a pale face peering out, then nothing but the rain streaking down the glass.
They walked for what felt like hours, but the forest only seemed to thicken, paths looping back on themselves, or vanishing into marshy ground. Jacob grew slower, stumbling often. Mark tried to keep his spirits up, talking about the rescue, promising hot chocolate and a warm blanket. But his own hope was ebbing, every compass check more confusing than the last. At one point, they reached a fork where three paths twisted away into the brush, none of them familiar. Mark chose the leftmost, but after 5 minutes, the way narrowed to a gully choked with blackberry canes. They turned back, only to find the fork had changed. Now a single path arched away beneath the trees, the others swallowed by undergrowth. Mark, Jacob tugged his sleeve. I hear the clocks. Mark froze. Somewhere ahead, in the hush between raindrops, he heard it too, a faint ticking, growing louder, as if 100 clocks were winding up behind every tree. The air thickened, damp and sweet, a hint of vanilla and roses threading through the pines. He knelt before Jacob, heart hammering. Don't listen, just look at me. Okay. He shut his own eyes, fighting the urge to look back, to follow the pull of that distant ticking. The sound grew louder, pressing in from every side. Mark remembered something. The old searcher at the staging area, warning the teams not to stray from the marked grid. If you get lost, don't follow what you hear. Trust the real world, not your senses. Mark forced himself to focus on the practical. He pressed his fingers to Jacob's wrist, felt a steady pulse, and tried to ground them both. Let's count steps, he said. 20 steps forward, no stopping, no matter what. Then we rest. Jacob nodded, eyes wide. Together, they started forward. 1, 2, 3, counting under their breath. The clocks faded, the air cleared. The forest brightened by degrees, the scent of rain overtaking the sugary, sickly sweetness. At the end of the count, they stumbled onto a muddy, familiar trail, a flagged searcher's tape fluttering from a branch. Mark nearly wept. This is it, he gasped. We're close. Voices echoed through the trees, real voices, calling Jacob's name, urgent and relieved. Mark bellowed back, and moments later, bright jackets and flashlights appeared between the trunks. Hands reached out, radios crackled to life, and the woods felt ordinary again. Just rain, mud, and the warmth of human voices. Mark looked over his shoulder, searching for a glimpse of the house through the trees, but there was nothing. No porch, no glowing windows, only the wet, tangled forest, as if the place had never been there at all. Mark staggered into the circle of rescuers, one arm tight around Jacob's shoulders, as the woods seemed to let go of them all at once. Flashlights carved away the gloom, radios blared with coordinates and cheers, and gloved hands steadied him, while others bundled Jacob into a mylar blanket. The chaos felt unreal, too bright, too noisy, after the hush and strange order of the house, but it was real, as solid and present as the mud clinging to Mark's boots. A medic knelt by Jacob, checking his pulse, shining a light in his eyes. He's okay, the medic called out, voice threaded with disbelief and relief. Some dehydration, but no injuries. How long was he missing? 5 days. Mark opened his mouth to answer, but his words stuck. He watched Jacob glance at him, uncertain. It didn't feel like that long, the boy murmured. The rescuers looked at each other, but Mark could see something haunted behind their eyes. Some of them had heard the stories about these woods, the places that didn't always match the map. Someone led Mark to a fallen log,
wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. "Where did you find him?" a deputy asked, leaning in, breath clouding in the damp air. Mark hesitated. He wanted to explain, to describe the impossible house, the clocks, the strange woman, and her ageless smile, but the words withered under the weight of their own strangeness. "There was an old house down by the ravine. It's not on any map. He trailed off, watching as searchers exchanged looks. "There's nothing but timberland down there," the deputy said, more gently than dismissively. "Some old foundations maybe. This place plays tricks, you know. You're lucky you didn't get turned around worse." Mark nodded, exhausted, but doubt gnawed at him. He asked for his map, and together they tried to retrace his steps. No matter how he described the route, no one could make it match the geography. Trails curved wrong, clearings overlapped, and the ravine he described simply wasn't where it should be. Jacob, bundled and pale, watched the adults argue over compasses and GPS units. Finally, he spoke up. "The house is real. It's not always there." A hush fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then a searcher said, trying to keep it light, "Bet it was an old hunting shack, right? Places like this, you can see things when you're tired." Mark looked at Jacob. The boy's face was set with a seriousness far older than his years. "She said the house gets lonely," Jacob said quietly, "but it lets you leave, if you want to, if you remember the way out." Later, as they hiked back to the staging area, Jacob carried on a rescuer's back, Mark walking stiffly, half in shock. He kept glancing over his shoulder. The woods behind them had already swallowed whatever path they'd followed, and the shadows beneath the trees pressed close, hiding everything they'd just escaped. Back at the command tent, people cheered as Jacob was reunited with his parents. Mark stood to one side, wrung out and shaking, sipping hot coffee he could barely taste. Someone patted his shoulder, called him a hero. He let the words wash over him, feeling both present and impossibly distant, as if he was still drifting in that golden-lit house where nothing ever changed. The debrief was awkward. Mark described what he could: the house, the clocks, the photos, the sense that the place itself was watching. "Maybe it's an old memory," the chief said quietly, after the others had drifted away. "There's legends about houses in these woods that show up for lost souls. They say they vanish by morning. Most folks just get turned around and find their way out, but some don't." Mark tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "It wasn't just a trick of the light," he said. "I saw it. Jacob saw it."
The chief only nodded. "Doesn't matter what the rest of us believe. You brought him home." As dawn approached, Mark wandered to the edge of the woods one last time. The first birds were calling, fog rising among the trees. He strained to see the faintest hint of a roof or chimney, a glint of light between the trunks, but there was nothing but tangled branches and a single muddy path vanishing into the undergrowth. Behind him, Jacob's mother hugged her son and wept. Mark turned away, heart full of gratitude and lingering dread. He knew what he'd seen. He knew what waited in the heart of the woods for those who wandered too far. A house full of clocks, children's laughter, and doors that sometimes opened, but not always to the world you hoped to find. And as the searchers packed up, leaving the forest to its secrets, Mark wondered how many others had stepped over that impossible threshold, and whether the house, somewhere deep in the trees, was still waiting for its next lost guest. In the days that followed, Mark Holter found that sleep wouldn't come easy. He kept replaying the way the woods had closed behind him, swallowing any trace of the path and the house with its golden-lit windows. The memory hovered at the edge of his thoughts, vivid and slippery as a fever dream. When he tried to describe what he'd seen, most folks offered a strained smile, a pat on the shoulder, or a quick change of subject. Jacob's parents sent thank you cards and homemade cookies, The department called him a hero, yet even as life returned to its ordinary rhythm, Mark carried the weight of that impossible night in the forest. Jacob Reese, too, was changed. The boy slept in fits, startled awake by dreams he could never quite explain. Sometimes, his mother would find him sitting on the edge of his bed, blinking in the dawn, quietly insisting it was still the day he'd left. "She told me the clocks don't work the same," he'd murmur, but couldn't say more before lapsing into silence, as if even speaking of the house might draw it closer. Doctors found no lasting harm. Jacob was healthy, if a bit pale and jumpy, and insisted he remembered very little, only warmth, the ticking of clocks, and the house that promised he could stay as long as he wanted. Whenever his parents pressed him, his face would go blank, and his eyes clouded, as if part of him still drifted among rain-slick roses and endless hallways. Sometimes he would look out the window, scanning the edge of the backyard woods, and his parents would quietly close the curtains. The rescue made the local paper. There was no mention of houses or haunted woods, just the courage of searchers and the relief of a boy returned home. But among the search party, stories began to circulate about the way the woods didn't line up with any map, about compasses spinning wild, about paths that led nowhere, and shadows that seemed to follow just out of sight. Old-timers swapped legends at the diner over black coffee, about the wandering house that showed up after storms, about children who disappeared for a day and came back changed, about places in the woods that weren't always there until you needed them, or until they needed you. Mark tried to find the house again. On a bright Saturday morning, he parked by the ravine, map and compass in hand, boots squelching in last night's mud. He walked for hours, retracing every twist and turn, every landmark he thought he remembered. The gnarled birch, the blackberry thicket, the shallow dip of the creek bed, but there was nothing, only tangled brush, mossed over stones, and the soft, relentless silence of the forest. The swing, the iron fence, the deep blue door, they had vanished as if they'd never been. Once at the foot of an old oak, Mark found a single red rain boot, half buried in leaves. It was too small for Jacob now, but it was real, the rubber still slick with rain. He stood staring at it for a long time before tucking it into his pack, a secret proof that what had happened hadn't just been a trick of loneliness or exhaustion. He saw Jacob and his mother at the grocery store not long after. The boy gripped his mother's hand tightly, shying away from the canned soup aisle, where the clocks on the wall ticked softly above the registers. Mark gave a little wave. Jacob hesitated, then offered a solemn nod in return. For a moment Mark saw something ancient in the boy's blue eyes, a memory that would never quite leave him. As the weeks rolled by, life returned to the slow rhythm of the town, but whispers lingered. Some folks warned their kids to stay close on foggy days. Others nailed horseshoes over their doors or avoided the ravine altogether. Sometimes, late at night, Mark would dream of the house, the smell of vanilla and roses, the parade of children's photographs, the gentle ticking of clocks all marking different hours. In those dreams, the house waited, windows glowing, door slightly ajar, the hush of expectation in every silent room. One autumn evening, just as the leaves were turning gold, Mark drove past the woods at sunset. The sky glowed copper and lavender, shadows long and blue between the trees. For a fleeting moment, he saw what looked like a porch light, flickering far among the trunks, a square of yellow that winked out as soon as he blinked. He slowed the car, peering into the gloom, but the light didn't return. All he could hear was the call of a night bird, and the wind in the pines. He thought of the house often, of the promise Jacob had whispered, that the house let you leave if you wanted, but only if you remembered the way out. He wondered how many others had wandered too far, found warmth and company and clocks that never agreed, and forgotten themselves inside a dream of comfort
and never-changing light. Some nights, lying awake in his quiet house, Mark would hear the faint ticking of a clock he didn't own, or catch a whiff of sweet floral air drifting through the open window, and he would wonder, heart racing, if the house was waiting for him too, if it waited for anyone who'd once walked beneath its roof, anyone who remembered just enough to find their way back. He hoped he never would, but he also knew, deep down, that some places in the world will always be there, just out of sight, waiting for the lonely, the lost, and the ones who still listen for the sound of clocks counting time that doesn't belong to any map at all.
Detective Ray Foster had worked the city's graveyard shift long enough to know that when a call came in at 3:17 a.m., it was never good. He nudged the radio off his chest as he sat in his battered sedan, trying to blink the exhaustion from his eyes. Rain smeared the windshield, refracting blue and red lights in streaks across the empty intersection. He listened, pen poised over his notebook, as dispatch relayed the details with clinical coldness. Unit 12, possible homicide, corner of Sycamore and 9th. Body found by building super, scene secured. Medical examiner, en route. Ray thumbed the mic. Unit 12, copy, ETA 3 minutes. He tossed the notebook onto the dash and started the engine, windshield wipers thrumming a nervous rhythm. Miller should have been riding shotgun, but Ray's partner was late again. The last message Ray got was a hurried text. "Half an hour ago, tied up, be there soon, start without me." That wasn't like Miller, who never missed a call, but Ray chalked it up to the endless overtime and the job's slow poison. Rain hammered harder as Ray turned onto Sycamore, the city feeling smaller and more alien by the minute. Apartment towers loomed overhead, windows blank or dim, all their secrets sealed against the night. Two black and whites sat at the curb, their lights splashing against the yellow crime scene tape that cordoned off the mouth of a narrow alley. Uniformed officers hunched in their raincoats, faces pinched with tiredness and weariness. Ray flashed his badge at the tape, nodding to the patrol sergeant. "What have we got?" The sergeant's voice was taut. "Super found a body in the alley, right outside the service entrance, locked from the inside. ID in the Vic's jacket. But you better see for yourself, detective." Ray ducked under the tape, his shoes squelching through puddles. The alley was narrow, brick walls slimy with runoff. Emergency lanterns cast pale circles on the ground, painting the scene in harsh relief. The victim lay sprawled on his side, rain pooling in the hollows of his coat. One of the MES techs snapped photos, while another took swabs and measurements. There was a sense of unease in the air, something more than the cold. Ray knelt by the body, frowning as he took in the details. Male, mid-40s, expensive overcoat, scuffed boots, hair matted to the scalp. A long, ugly gash ran from jaw to collar, blood washed thin by the rain. He checked the victim's hands, no defensive wounds. Whoever did this had surprised him. He reached for the wallet in the victim's inside pocket. The sergeant handed over the clear evidence bag. Ray stared at the ID, his breath catching in his throat. Name Detective Samuel Miller. Badge number Miller's. Photo Miller's. He stared at the face on the driver's license, willing it to morph, to be someone else. It was Miller, his partner, the man he'd trusted on night shifts for 7 years. Ray rocked back on his heels, heart hammering in his chest. He looked again at the body, searching for some mistake, some trick of light. He checked for the scar above the left eyebrow, the odd twist to the nose from a high school break, even the faded tattoo on the wrist, a tiny anchor, a story Miller never quite finished telling. All there. He staggered up, grabbing the alley wall for support. This can't be right," he muttered, voice shaking. The sergeant hovered, rain dripping off his hat. "You okay, detective?" Ray looked at the younger man, barely seeing him. "I need you to check something. Is Miller on the radio? Did anyone see him tonight?" "Not since the shift started,"
The sergeant replied quietly. I just assumed he was with you. Ray wiped rain and sweat from his face. The alley seemed to tilt beneath him. He fumbled out his phone, dialing Miller's number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. Miller's voice, bright and tired, promising to call back. Ray glanced at the patrol cars, the gathering crowd of neighbors peering through the rain, the yellow tape that felt suddenly like a cage. He knelt again, searching for evidence, anything that would explain how his partner could be dead at his feet, yet also late for the call. As the ME zipped the body bag, Ray felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. He grabbed the sergeant by the arm. Don't tell anyone outside this team. Not yet. This stays between us until I get answers. Lock down the scene, double-check every camera in the area, and find me any footage you can. He stepped back, heart in free fall, watching as the rain washed the blood into the gutter. If this was Miller, his Miller, then who had texted him 30 minutes ago? And if it wasn't, then who was lying dead in the alley, wearing his partner's face, his badge, his very skin? Ray couldn't escape the feeling that reality had thinned, that everything in the alley was off by just enough to make him question his own senses. The ME's van rumbled away, taking the body, Miller's body, toward the city morgue, while Ray stood in the rain, listening to the static in his earpiece and the pulsing of his own blood. His partner's ID was right there in the evidence bag, but his phone buzzed in Ray's pocket, vibrating with another text from Miller's number. On my way, sorry, ETA 10. Ray's fingers went numb. He stared at the glowing screen, the familiar string of emojis Miller always tacked on as a joke. He looked up at the sergeant. Keep the scene closed. No leaks, no statements to the press. Anyone tries to get in, you call me first. He walked to his car, feeling every raindrop like a needle. His phone buzzed again. Another text. Where are you? Want coffee? Ray tried calling back, his thumb slipping on the wet glass. Rings, then voicemail, again and again. Miller's voice sounded perfectly normal, as if he'd only stepped out for a smoke. He slumped in the front seat of his cruiser, soaked and shivering, his mind spinning. He forced himself to work. He pulled up city records for the building, reviewed police logs for the night, and requested a search for Miller's vehicle from dispatch. No one had seen it leave the precinct lot. The forensic team radioed in Pelham on the Vic. No wallet or phone besides the ID. No signs of forced entry or struggle. Locked from inside. We'll run prints and dental for confirmation. Ray wanted to scream. He keyed his mic. Voice rough. Copy. Priority. Let me know the minute you get a match.
He sat in silence as the rain eased. Eventually, a rookie officer tapped his window. Detective? Security wants you in the building. There's something on the lobby footage. Ray left his car and followed the officer into the harsh-lit lobby, rainwater squelching in his shoes. A young security guard had the playback ready on an old monitor. This is from about an hour before the super found the body, he said, voice hushed. The black and white video showed a man in an overcoat entering through the side door, head down, moving quickly. He looked up as he passed the camera. Ray's heart stopped. The face was Miller's, drawn, pale, tired, but unmistakable. The timestamp was just after 2 a.m. He watched as Miller entered the elevator, pressed the button for the service level, and vanished from frame. A minute later, the feed flickered. Static overtook the screen for a few seconds, then nothing, as if the building itself had held its breath. Ray pressed the rewind, pausing on Miller's face. The scar above the eyebrow, the twist of the nose, there was no mistaking it. But Miller was still missing, his phone still sending texts, his car still unaccounted for. A voice crackled over the precinct radio. Detective Foster, you copy? I've got a Detective Miller trying to check in at the precinct entrance. Says he left his badge at home. Ray's world lurched. He keyed the mic. Let him in. Don't let him leave. I'm on my way. He drove through empty streets, adrenaline burning away the fog in his brain. When he reached the precinct lot, he spotted Miller's car, his actual car, the dented blue Corolla, parked at the curb. Miller stood beneath the awning, hair plastered by rain, shoulders hunched in his familiar way. He looked up as Ray approached, offering a tired half-smile. "Rough night, huh?" Miller said, his voice exactly right. Ray stared, searching for anything wrong, anything off. "Where've you been?" Ray asked, forcing his voice to stay steady. Miller shrugged. "Phone died, went home to change, got caught in the storm." "Everything all right?" Ray's chest felt tight. "We need to talk. Now." Inside, they entered a deserted interview room. Miller sighed. They entered a deserted interview room. Ray locked the door and dropped the evidence bag on the table. The ID, the badge, Miller's photograph, everything. Miller's eyes widened as he picked up the ID. "What's this, Ray?" Ray kept his gaze hard. "That's what I want to know. Where were you at 3 a.m.? Why is there a body with your face, your badge, your goddamn tattoo lying in the morgue right now?" Miller's expression fractured. Fear, confusion, something else. He stammered. "Ray, I don't know. I swear to you, Ray cut him off. "Prove it. Tell me something only you'd know." Miller took a shaky breath. "Your first case, you dropped your gun in the river and told everyone you slipped on moss. It was winter. There was no moss. I covered for you, remember?" Ray's knees almost gave. The memory was real, private, a secret. But his mind whirled. Was that proof, or just something the other Miller would know too? Ray stepped back, voice trembling. "We need prints. We need DNA. Until then you're not leaving. And God help us if someone else shows up wearing your face tonight." Outside, thunder rumbled. Ray felt the ground slip again, as if every certainty, every fact, was a thin crust over something deep, cold, and wrong. Ray paced the hallway, outside the interview room, the cold tile echoing his footsteps, as if the whole building were hollow. He could see Miller through the narrow glass panel, shoulders hunched, eyes darting as he turned the ID over in his hands again and again. Rain traced patterns down the window, blurring the city's glow into an impressionist smear. Ray's mind churned with every impossible detail. The body, the badge, the texts, Miller's alibi. He felt suspended above his own life, waiting for the crash. The captain arrived, all bluster and gray hair. "Foster, you want to tell me why your partner's locked in an interview room, and why there are 6 messages on my phone about you commandeering my precinct?" Ray drew him aside, lowering his voice. "There's a body in the morgue, with Miller's ID, his face, his prints. At the same time, Miller shows up here, with a story about dead batteries and lost keys. I don't know what the hell is happening." The captain's brow furrowed. "Forensics will sort it out. Until then we treat your Miller as a person of interest, not a suspect. I'm pulling you off the case, Ray. You're too close." Ray's jaw tightened, but he nodded, knowing the order was coming. Still, he couldn't leave it alone, not when the world felt as if it was folding in on itself. He headed to his desk, grabbing his backup phone and digging through Miller's old notebooks, desperate for something, anything, that might make sense of the night. He called the morgue. "This is Detective Foster. I need an update on the Jane Doe from Sycamore and Ice." "Sorry, John Doe. Possible match for Detective Miller." The ME sounded tired. "We're running prints and dental. Preliminary match is strong. Scarring, old breaks, everything lines up. But Detective, we also have you listed as the next of kin for Miller. You want to come down and take a look?" Ray's mouth was dry. "Not yet. Call me the second DNA comes in." He hung up, hands trembling. He opened Miller's case journal, flipping through pages of tight, looping script, half-completed crossword clues, numbers, sketches, observations about suspects, notes on old cases. On one page, a hastily scrawled message caught Ray's eye.
If you see me, and I don't know you, run. Ray's blood ran cold. He checked the date. 3 days ago. He skimmed the following entries, references to shadows, feeling watched, waking up, with bruises he couldn't explain. Miller had been scared. Ray's backup phone buzzed. A new message from Miller's number. Don't trust what you see. They're getting better at it. Meet me where we used to watch the fireworks. Ray's heart hammered. He looked up at the interview room. Miller still sat inside, slumped and exhausted, waiting for some verdict. Ray ducked out of the precinct, shoving his badge into his jacket. The fireworks spot was a hilltop at the edge of town, a memory from a case they'd closed years ago. Just the two of them, sharing warm beers, and watching bursts of color over the skyline. The message's phrasing, where we used to watch, felt personal, right? But the voice in Ray's head wouldn't stop. What if both of them are fakes?
He pulled up outside the park, rain pounding the empty lot. A lone figure stood at the fence, hood pulled up, shoulders tense. Ray approached slowly, his free hand on his sidearm. The man turned. It was Miller, again, but this one looked haggard, face drawn, eyes ringed in red. "Ray, it's me," he said, voice raw with desperation. "You can't trust the one at the station. He's not me. Please ask me anything." Ray's breath caught. "What's happening?" "I don't know. I think I'm being followed by myself. I wake up places I don't remember, till my phone keeps disappearing. That thing at the precinct, it has my memories, my voice, but it's wrong." Ray's world spun. "How do I know you're not the copy?" Miller managed a pained smile. "You remember the night of the warehouse stakeout, the cat that climbed into your lap, and you almost shot your own foot off? I swore I'd never tell anyone." Ray almost laughed. He'd never shared that story, but then, so had the Miller at the station known the river secret. Miller looked close to tears. "I know it sounds crazy, but I think there's more than one of me. You have to be careful, Ray. I think I'm next." Lightning flashed overhead, and for an instant, Ray saw another shape move behind the trees. He drew his weapon, heart pounding. Miller flinched. "We have to go. If it finds us, if it finds you, it'll take your place too." Ray backed toward his car, a surge of dread twisting in his gut. "Get in. We're not safe out here." As Miller scrambled into the passenger seat, Ray glanced into the rear view. For a heartbeat, he saw his own reflection, pale, wide-eyed, lips parted in confusion, and he couldn't help but wonder if there might come a night when he too would stare into a face that matched his own exactly. The rain hammered down as Ray sped through empty streets. Miller slumped beside him, shivering and wild-eyed. The headlights carved fleeting corridors through sheets of water, each block blurring into the next, as if the whole city had become unmoored from time and geography. Ray's mind raced with questions, but he kept his voice steady, every instinct on high alert. "Start at the beginning," Ray said. "When did you know something was wrong?" Miller pressed his fists to his forehead, voice trembling. "A week ago, I started losing time, hours, sometimes whole nights. Gone. I'd wake up in places I didn't remember going. My phone was full of calls I never made. Then there were messages, from my own number, saying things I don't remember saying. Warnings, pleas for help. I thought I was losing it, Ray, but then I saw myself across the street, watching me. Same clothes, same walk, just standing there, waiting. That's when I started hiding out, sending you those weird texts. I hoped if there was a copy, it wouldn't know the old meeting spots." Ray's hands tightened on the wheel. He checked the mirrors, looking for tails, doppelgangers, or worse. "So what do you think this is? Identity theft? Some kind of deep fake? Cloning?" Miller gave a short, bitter laugh. "God, I wish I knew.
All I know is the thing at the precinct. It's not me. It acts like me, talks like me, knows what only I'd know. But there's something off. No one else sees it because it fits in so well. They turned onto a side street and parked under an overhanging maple, city lights smudged by the storm. Ray killed the engine. For a long moment, the only sound was the drum of rain and the erratic ticking of the car's cooling engine. Ray turned, searching Miller's face. I need you to prove you're you, not just with stories, but with something deeper, something the other one couldn't fake. Miller swallowed, looking near tears. When your father died, I was the only one who came with you to the funeral. I held your shoulder when you cried. You said you felt like you'd never really know yourself again. And I told you, you only find yourself on the worst nights. Ray shut his eyes, a cold ache blooming in his chest. That night had never left him. He'd never repeated those words, not even in therapy. All right, he whispered. All right. They sat in silence, both breathing hard, as the city rolled by outside, indifferent. Finally Ray spoke. If the copy is inside the precinct, what's its plan? Miller stared out at the rain. I don't know. I think it wants to become me, to erase me, maybe even erase you. I've been tracking my movements, trying to leave clues. If it figures out I'm still alive. He trailed off, eyes widening, as headlights swung across the windshield. Another car turned into the street, slowing as it approached. Ray's pulse spiked. He reached for his gun. Stay down, he hissed, watching as the car, a nondescript gray sedan, rolled past. In the glare, he caught a glimpse of a driver's face, sharp features, familiar profile. For a split second, the driver's eyes met his cold blank, as if there was nothing human behind them. Miller slid lower in the seat. That's it. That's what I saw. It follows me, or maybe it follows both of us. Ray's phone buzzed in his pocket. A new text, from Miller's number. Ray, don't trust him. Come back. You're in danger. He stared at it, cold dread seeping into his bones. Which one had sent this? The Miller beside him, the copy at the station, or something else? Watching from the storm, his mind raced. We have to force it to make a mistake. Some way to tell the world which one of you is real. He rifled through Miller's old case notebooks, searching for clues, for anything the real Miller would know that the copy might not. There, tucked in the back, was a scrap of a page, an address scrawled in Miller's writing. 311 Fairchild Avenue, basement. Miller spotted it, nodding. That's where I was last night. There's something there. Evidence. Maybe. I was going to bring you, but I got spooked. Ray started the engine again. Let's go. Whatever's happening, it ends tonight. As they pulled away, Ray glanced once more in the rear view. The gray sedan had vanished, but in the after image of the headlights, he saw not just Miller's reflection in the glass, but his own, doubled, distorted, as if the city itself was full of mirrors, and only one of them might ever walk away whole. Rain pounded the roof as they sped toward the truth. The city's edges blurred, the streets narrowing to the thread of a single choice, trust or terror, or both. In the hush between thunderclaps, Ray realized the worst thing wasn't that he might lose his partner. It was that, in a world of perfect doubles, he might lose himself.
Fairchild Avenue was a ghost street at this hour. Long blocks of crumbling brick buildings, the air wet with rain, and the hush of a city holding its breath. Ray parked 2 doors down, engine idling for a moment. As he scanned the mirrors, the street was empty, save for a few dark windows and the blurred orange glow of a distant intersection. Miller hunched beside him, hands clenched, shoulders trembling with fear and adrenaline. They crossed to 311, a sunken entry half hidden by rusted railings and wild overgrown vines. The front door was unlocked, the lobby stale with mildew and the faint metallic smell of old radiators. They made their way down a flight of stairs, boots echoing on cracked tile, past peeling paint and graffiti that flickered in the yellowed hall light. At the bottom, a battered metal door stood ajar. Its lock snapped long ago. Miller nodded once, then pushed it open. The basement was dark, except for a single bulb dangling over a battered desk piled high with folders and tape recorders. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with the hush of secrets too long kept. Ray swept his flashlight across the room. Papers, photos, an empty cot in the corner, a half-finished cup of coffee long gone cold. "This is where I hid when I realized it was after me," Miller whispered, "where I kept track of the things I couldn't explain." He moved to the desk and began sorting through the folders, hands shaking. Ray watched his partner's every move, searching for a tell, some subtle proof of authenticity, hoping and fearing at once. He picked up a photo, two Millers side by side, one grinning, one unsmiling, the background a blur of city streets. "How is this possible?" Ray muttered. Miller's voice was hollow. "It was waiting for me here. One night, I ran, but I think it got what it needed. My face, my voice, my memories. I don't even know how much of me is left." Ray forced himself to focus. "We need something the copy can't fake. Medical records, DNA, anything." Miller shook his head. "If it's good enough to fool you and everyone else, maybe it can fool tests too. We need proof of its intentions, not just its presence." They rifled through case files, notes, voice memos, each more fractured than the last. Fragments of nights spent running, watching, hiding. One audio file played back Miller's voice, frantic and shaking. "If you find this, I'm not sure I'm still me. It remembers everything. It learns fast. Ray, trust your gut. Don't trust the eyes." Suddenly, footsteps thudded overhead. Both men froze, exchanging a look of pure dread. Ray drew his sidearm, stepping toward the door, heart racing. Another set of footsteps, then a voice, Miller's voice, called down the stairwell. "Ray, are you down there? I got your message. Miller's with me. We need to talk." Ray's blood turned to ice. He glanced at the Miller beside him, whose face went slack with terror. "Ignore it," Miller whispered. "It's not me. It's it." But the voice above grew louder, more insistent, echoing off the wet brick. "Ray, open up. It's me. You're making a mistake." Ray backed deeper into the basement, gun trembling in his grip. "Stay behind me," he hissed. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. The knob rattled. Then in a moment that would replay in Ray's nightmares for years, the door swung open, and two figures stepped in. Both Miller. Same coat, same scar, same haunted eyes. Ray's mind reeled. He leveled the gun. "Both of you, hands where I can see them." They obeyed, but it was impossible to tell which was which. Sweat ran down Ray's face. One Miller stepped forward, eyes pleading. "Ray, the other one. He's not me. He's the thing that's been following me, using my memories." The second Miller's voice shook. "Don't listen. That's what it does. It gets inside your head. I'm the one who was with you at the funeral. Remember the river, the cat, the fireworks. Please, you have to believe me." The first Miller, still by the desk, shouted, "Ray, I would never beg. Not like that. We promised, no matter what, we'd face the end with some dignity." Ray's hands shook. The world spun. Two faces, two voices. His own fear mirrored in both. He closed his eyes, listening not to the words, but the tone, the truth beneath the panic. He heard the memory of the funeral. "You only find yourself on the worst nights." Heard the joke about the cat, the fireworks, but then something else. The way the second Miller had begged. Voice just a touch too desperate. The real Miller, Ray knew, was stubborn, proud, even when terrified. He made his choice. He turned to the Miller still by the desk. "You, give me your left hand."
The miller held it out, steady as stone. There, just above the wrist, was the old faint tattoo, a tiny anchor. But more than that, his eyes met Ray's with a fierce, stubborn clarity. "Whatever happens, partner, don't let it take you too." The other miller lunged. Ray fired. The sound roared in the tiny room, echoing like thunder. The copy fell, dissolving, face slackening, bones softening, form blurring into something that wasn't quite human. It vanished, leaving behind only a puddle of rain and shadow. Ray collapsed, gun slipping from his grip. Miller knelt, wrapping an arm around his friend. For a long time, they sat in the rain-soaked basement, surrounded by the evidence of how close they'd come to losing everything. When dawn finally crept in, they left Fairchild Avenue behind. Both changed. Ray knew that in the city's mirrors and shadows, something might always be watching, waiting. But for now, he walked out with his partner, knowing that sometimes, on the worst nights, you truly find yourself. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you bring your friends home too.
Officer Lila Ramirez drummed her fingers on the steering wheel. Her patrol car rolling through streets, bleached pale by midnight streetlights. She yawned, the radio hissing quietly, half expecting another routine call, barking dog, domestic argument, maybe a lost teenager. Instead, the dispatch crackled to life with an edge that made both officers glance at each other in the dim blue glow. Unit 712, disturbance reported at 48 Willow Lane. Neighbors say they see lights in the upper windows, shouting, "Possible altercation, please respond, backup available." Her partner, Officer Ben Carter, sat up straighter, glancing at the address on his phone. "Willow Lane, isn't that the place?" "Yeah," Lila said, a prickle running up her spine. "That's the old Farnsworth place. I thought it was condemned." Ben snorted, but his voice was uneasy. "My dad used to say the house was haunted, something about a family that vanished, and a murder nobody solved. Just urban legend." Right, Lila said, making herself sound confident. She flicked on the siren, steering toward the overgrown edge of town, where the old mansions sat back from the road, shrouded in tangled hedges and memories nobody wanted to keep. She tried not to think about ghost stories. Their cruiser crunched up the gravel drive, headlights catching on a rusted mailbox, and the house looming behind it, a great block of weathered wood and stone, roof lines jagged as broken teeth. The porch was buried in vines, windows boarded over, a single gnarled tree pressing against the east wall. Lila slowed, searching for signs of life. "Dispatch, Unit 712 on scene at Willow Lane," she called, voice steady. "House appears secure from the front. We'll check perimeter." "Copy, 712. Neighbors still report lights and voices," came the reply, tinged with static. "Proceed with caution." They stepped out into the night air, boots sinking into a tangle of weeds. The house was huge, older than anything else on the street, every inch draped with decades of neglect. Ben flicked his flashlight along the porch, revealing thick boards nailed over the door, and shattered glass beneath, long since choked by dust and ivy. "No way anyone's getting in through here," he muttered. Lila circled the house, shining her light over warped siding and rain-rotted lattice. She paused at a window, pressing close. Inside, dust motes drifted in the beam, thick as fog. No footprints, no sign of intrusion, just the frozen, cluttered remains of another century. She checked the lock, rusted shut, unmoved in years. Ben caught up, squinting at the upper floor. "Wait, there," he pointed, and Lila followed his gaze. Through a crack between warped shutters, she saw a faint glimmer, a wavering glow, like candlelight, bobbing from room to room. It vanished, then reappeared farther down the hall,
a silhouette flickering behind it. For a moment, Lila thought she saw a woman's face, pale and startled, before the light blinked out. "Did you?" she began. "Yeah," Ben breathed. That was definitely a light. They finished circling the property, but every window and door was sealed, dust undisturbed. Lila's radio hissed again. Only static. She tried calling dispatch, but the line crackled. No answer. Ben ran a hand over his face, peering into the shadows. "Let's check the back. Maybe someone forced the kitchen door." The back entrance was barely visible behind a collapsed trellis. The lock was ancient, the door warped and clinging to the frame. Lila pressed her shoulder to it, and Ben wedged his flashlight in the gap, levering gently, until with a shriek of wood, the seal broke, and the door shuddered open. A rush of cold air poured out. Dust, rot, something sweet and sickly. Lila swept her flashlight into the gloom. Everything inside was gray and still, as if the world had ended mid-breath. Stacks of yellowed newspapers leaned against the wall. A rotary phone sat in the cradle, its cord wound in a spiral on the counter. A calendar hung crooked on the fridge, stuck forever on June 1964. "No way anyone's lived here since then," Ben murmured, brushing a layer of dust from the counter. His gloved finger left the only mark. They crept deeper, flashlights cutting tunnels through the shadows. Every room was locked in a time warp. Plastic-covered couches, TV with rabbit ear antenna, dishes in the sink gone to powder. Lila's heart thudded louder with each step. Suddenly, upstairs, a door slammed. Both officers froze, listening. For a moment, all was silent. Then came the faintest sound of voices, angry, muffled, impossible to make out. A woman's sob, the scrape of a chair, a man's harsh whisper. Ben's eyes were huge in the beam of his light. "That wasn't the wind," Lila nodded, hand on her holstered weapon. "Let's go." Quietly, they climbed the stairs, each footstep sending up puffs of ancient dust. On the landing, a band of weak moonlight crept through a broken shutter, casting shadows that seemed to shift and twist. At the end of the hall, a door stood ajar, light flickering beneath it. Impossible, and yet, as real as their own fear. Lila reached for the handle, pulse roaring in her ears. "Police," she called, her voice shaking the silence. "Is anyone there?" The light went out. All at once, the house seemed to breathe in the dark, holding its secrets close. And somewhere, deep inside the walls, something whispered back. Ben's light jittered over faded wallpaper as he and Lila stood side by side on the upstairs landing, the hush of the house closing in around them like a weight. The echo of that slammed door still hung in the air, the silence beneath it sharp and listening. For a moment, neither officer moved, both caught in the tension between police procedure and the crawling sense that something was deeply, impossibly wrong. Lila cleared her throat, trying to sound steady. "We go in together. On three." Ben nodded, his jaw tight. "Ready." Lila's fingers curled around the handle, cold and gritty with dust. 1, 2, 3. She pushed the door open, and their beam swept into the darkness. The room beyond was a girl's bedroom, pink wallpaper, a canopy bed draped in faded tulle, a bureau lined with porcelain figurines, all perfectly preserved, but furred with decades of dust. A record player stood on the floor, its lid open, a warped vinyl disc left halfway through a song. As they entered, a chill draft made the beads on the windowsill clatter softly, and for a heartbeat, Lila thought she heard distant music, tinny, mournful, gone as soon as she strained to listen.
There were no footprints in the dust, but their own. Ben searched the closet, Lila behind the curtains, but nothing stirred, except shadows and memories. Still, the sensation of being watched crawled up their spines, impossible to shake. "Look," Ben whispered, nodding toward a vanity by the window. Its round mirror was streaked and blind with age, but in the beam of Lila's flashlight, something glimmered, a fresh handprint, perfectly formed, too small to be either of theirs. Lila's breath caught. That wasn't here before. Ben shivered. Let's check the rest of the floor. They moved down the hall, peering into rooms locked in 1964, a study with an unfinished crossword on the desk, a bathroom still holding a brittle bar of soap, a sewing room where a half-made dress lay forever across the machine. In every room, the air was thick with that eerie staleness, yet here and there, small signs of something recent. A teacup moved, a cracked door that hadn't been opened before, a faint ripple in the dust on a stair. As they approached the end of the hall, the voices returned, clearer now, a man and woman arguing in frantic, overlapping bursts. The words were hard to catch, as if spoken underwater, but the anger and desperation in them was unmistakable. I told you, no more secrets. You're scaring her. Stop. A thud, a child's sob, the shattering of glass. Lila pressed her back to the wall, Ben covering the door at the end. A heavy oak slab, splintered around the handle, as if forced inwards long ago. She met his gaze, nodded, then kicked the door open. Their flashlights revealed a parlor, elegant but ruined. The wallpaper was peeling, armchairs askew, a shattered decanter glittering on the rug. For a second, the air shimmered, and both officers froze as figures flickered into being. Half seen, translucent, caught in a loop. A man in a suit, red-faced and furious. A woman clutching a child, her face streaked with tears. The man lunged. The woman screamed. The child reached toward the door. Then with a sickening jolt, it all vanished. The room was empty again. The only sound their harsh breathing and the distant tick of a stopped clock. Lila's heart hammered. Did you see that? Ben's voice was barely a whisper. Every detail. They approached the fireplace, where an old police badge lay in the ashes, tarnished but legible. Patrolman D. Hollis, 1964. Lila picked it up, feeling the cold bite through her gloves. Dispatch. This is Unit 712. Do you copy? She tried her radio again, but all she got was static. Then faintly, a clipped voice. Unit 712 Willow Lane. Family dispute reported. 10/17. Backup en route. Ben stared at the radio. Did that sound old to you? Lila nodded, her hand shaking as she tucked the badge into an evidence pouch. Like a recording. From back then. The air grew colder still, their breath fogging as they backed toward the door. Suddenly, Ben's flashlight flickered and died. Lila's followed a heartbeat later, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the faint glow of moonlight from the hall. Then footsteps thundered overhead, impossible, as there was no third floor, and the walls seemed to press in, the whole house groaning around them. A child's voice called out, clear and close, "Help me." Both officers whirled, heart in their throats, but there was only darkness. Lila fumbled for her backup flashlight, clicking it on just as Ben grabbed her arm. His voice raw, "We need to get out of here, now." But as they rushed for the stairs, the shadows thickened, and the house seemed to shift, as if time itself had curled back around them, locking every door, trapping every secret, and daring them to find the truth before it was too late. The staircase creaked under Lila's and Ben's boots, the sound impossibly loud in the muffled hush that had descended over the house. The faint ghostly call, "Help me," still echoed in Lila's mind as they hurried down the steps, every instinct urging her to get outside, to daylight, and radios, and the clean air of the real world. But the deeper they moved into the house, the more it seemed to resist, each room twisting strangely behind them, doorways no longer where they'd been,
walls stretching into endless corridors lined with black and white family photos, every face blurred or turned away. They reached the first floor landing, breathless and tense, and nearly collided with the parlor door, which now stood wide open, though Lila was sure she'd left it shut. Inside, moonlight slanted through a crack in the boarded windows, illuminating a fresh chaos. Chairs overturned, a broken lamp on the rug, dusty footprints, small barefoot, leading to the fireplace, and then vanishing, as if their maker had stepped straight into the shadows. Lila swept her flashlight across the mantel. On it sat a framed photo, a family, 1960s clothing and hair, mother, father, little girl. In the dusty glass, for a split second, she thought she saw the figures shift, the girl's mouth opening in a silent scream. But when she blinked, they were still again. "Did you hear that?" Ben whispered. Lila turned, listening. From somewhere behind the walls came the slow, rhythmic sound of someone knocking. A soft, steady tap, tap, like a child's fist against old wood. Ben's face was pale in the dim beam. "That's coming from the basement." Neither wanted to go, but both were too deep to turn back. They made their way to the kitchen, searching for the door to the cellar. They found it behind a warped panel, hidden beneath a calendar from June 1964, the days leading up to the 14th, crossed out in red pencil. Lila hesitated, then pulled the door open. A blast of icy air struck them, thick with dust and the scent of mold. They descended narrow stairs, flashlights trembling. The cellar was crammed with boxes and old furniture, jars of preserves long gone cloudy on wooden shelves. In the far corner, something moved, a flicker of white gone. When Lila focused on it, Ben's foot struck something. He bent and picked up a small battered shoe, barely big enough for a child. "Lila," he whispered, holding it up. Suddenly, the air vibrated with voices, a woman's sob, a man shouting, the shattering crash of something breaking. In the wavering flashlight beams, shadowy figures rippled across the walls, scenes replaying themselves in rapid, feverish bursts. The man dragged the woman down the steps, the girl following, crying. The woman screamed. The man slammed the door. Darkness swallowed them all.
Then silence fell, as total as the grave. Lila crouched, searching the floor. There, beneath the shoe, she found a thin metal object, a locket. The chain snapped. Inside was a photo, the same little girl from the parlor picture, her name scratched on the back, in looping, childish script. "Emily, we have to find her," Lila whispered, voice trembling, though she knew, with a sick certainty, that whatever had happened here was long past saving. They turned to go, but the stairs behind them stretched away, impossibly long, each step receding, as if the house itself didn't want to let them leave. Lila grabbed Ben's hand. "Don't let go. Don't listen to anything but my voice." As they stumbled back up, the house seemed to warp and buckle, the walls breathing, voices rising all around them. "Help me, please, help me." As if the whole place was a living memory, desperate to pull them in. They burst back into the kitchen, gasping, and found the room changed, brighter, cleaner, as if restored to the moment before everything broke. In the corner stood a little girl, translucent, clutching a teddy bear. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "Can you help me?" she whispered. Lila took a step forward, her hand open. "Emily, we're here to help. What happened?" The girl's lips quivered. "Daddy was angry. He hurt Mommy. I tried to hide." Tears ran down her face. Then she faded, becoming a swirl of dust in the shaft of moonlight. All at once, the house convulsed. Doors slammed upstairs, the walls shuddered, and a rush of wind spun dust through the air. Lila gripped Ben's arm, dragging him to the back door, but the kitchen seemed to stretch away from them, every window and exit melting into shadow. Ben yelled, "The locket! Show her the locket!" Lila turned, heart thundering, and held out the tiny necklace. "Emily, we found this. It's yours." For a heartbeat, silence, then the cold faded, the kitchen returning to its ruined, dusty state, the sense of pressure lifted, the doors and windows reappearing as they'd been. In the quiet, Lila felt a presence pass by, gentle, sad, but finally at peace. They staggered into the hallway, clutching the locket, both shaken to the core. Outside, the first hint of dawn was lightening the sky, but in that house, time still felt wrong, fragile, as if the past might sweep in again at any second, demanding to be remembered. The first pale shimmer of dawn crept through cracks in the warped shutters, the cold blue light cutting weak lines across the ruined hallway. Lila pressed her back to the wall, lungs burning, the little locket cold and heavy in her fist. Beside her, Ben shivered and wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes flicking up the stairs, back toward the parlor, then to the cellar door, as if expecting something else to come crawling from the dark. For a moment, all was still, then without warning, the temperature plunged again. The house seemed to draw a deep shuddering breath, boards creaking, the walls flexing, as if straining to contain decades of pain and memory. The voices returned, sharper now, a woman sobbing, a man's broken shouts, the plaintive wail of a child, echoing from floor to ceiling, room to room. The officers' radios sputtered to life, garbled static at first, then a snatch of a voice, clipped and staticky. Unit 712 Willow Lane, respond, disturbance, 1017. It was the same call they'd received earlier, but distorted, like a transmission lost in time. Ben grabbed Lila's arm. We need to go, now, this place is feeding on itself. But as they tried to move toward the front door, the house rebelled. The hallway stretched like taffy, doors slamming shut, just ahead of them, walls squeezing tighter. Lila's flashlight flickered and died. The only light came from the faint glow outside, a desperate promise of escape. A shadow appeared at the head of the stairs, broad-shouldered, its face blurred, its outline pulsing like a bad signal. It started down, slow and menacing, trailing darkness. The temperature plunged further, each breath fogging in the air. Back, get back, Ben hissed, pulling Lila toward the kitchen. They crashed into the parlor instead, the door slamming behind them with the finality of a coffin lid. Inside, the past and present clashed in a fever dream. The family from the photograph, flickering between flesh and shadow, relived their final night. The father's fury, the mother's desperate pleas, the girl's terrified sobs. The whole room pulsed with violence and heartbreak. The air grew thick, hard to breathe, every detail sharpened. The smell of spilled gin, the crackle of a record gone to static, the acrid bite of fear. Lila felt herself being drawn in, her limbs heavy, as if something tried to pull her into the story, tried to make her a witness, or a participant. She couldn't tell which. She clenched the locket, focusing on its chill. "Emily," she cried, voice trembling, "you don't have to stay here. You're not alone. We're here. We remember." The room convulsed. The child's ghost appeared again, eyes shining with hope and terror. The father's shadow turned, looming over her, then froze, as if unable to cross some final boundary. Ben, voice hoarse, shouted, "Emily, it's time. You can go. We found your locket. You're safe now." With a sound like 100 clocks striking midnight, the house shuddered. The ghostly father screamed, the parlor lights flared, and the child stepped into the beam of dawn that managed to sneak past the boarded window. For one heart-stopping moment, her face was calm, relieved. The other shadows recoiled, as if the light burned them. The house let out a great sighing moan, the floor vibrating underfoot. Doors flew open along the hallway, windows burst inward, and a powerful wind tore through the house, scattering dust, papers, memories, clearing the air with the violence of release. The officers staggered, fighting the wind, shielding their eyes. Through the chaos, Lila felt the weight of the house's pain break and dissipate. She saw, as if from a distance, the child's spirit drift upward, dissolving into light, the locket in her small hand. As suddenly as it began, the wind died. Silence rushed in to fill the void. The parlor, battered and ruined, was empty. No family,
No shadows, no flickering horrors, only dust and the wreckage of lives long lost. Ben found his voice first, weak with awe and exhaustion. "Is it over?" Lila nodded, though she wasn't sure. "I think she's free."
They found the kitchen door wide open, the cold morning air pouring in, the garden outside awash with pale sun. The feeling of suffocation was gone. The house was just a house again, broken, empty, almost peaceful. They stepped out into the overgrown yard, breathing hard, blinking in the new light. As they crossed the porch, Lila looked back once. In an upstairs window, just for a moment, she saw the outline of a little girl waving, her smile sad and grateful. Then the window darkened, and the figure was gone. Their radios crackled back to life, the dispatcher's voice urgent and near. "Unit 712, do you copy? Where are you? You disappeared off the map. Are you safe?" Lila keyed the mic, voice unsteady. "Unit 712, we're clear. Disturbance resolved. Requesting backup for scene containment." Ben slid into the passenger seat, running trembling hands through his hair. Lila looked down at the locket, the chain now warm in her palm. The badge from 1964 was tucked in her pocket, real proof maybe, that what they'd witnessed wasn't just a nightmare. The house loomed behind them, silent as a tomb, its secrets finally at rest. But as she started the engine and pulled away, Lila knew that every so often, someone would see a light flicker behind those boarded windows, and remember the night they'd nearly vanished into the house that time refused to let go. Sunlight finally spilled over the tangled hedges and battered porch of 48 Willow Lane as Officer Lila Ramirez guided the cruiser down the gravel drive. Ben leaned his head back, face pale and eyes wide, every nerve still buzzing from what they'd just survived. The silence in the car was heavy, not awkward. Both of them caught somewhere between disbelief and relief, listening to the familiar crackle of the radio, the ordinary world slowly bleeding back in. Behind them, the house looked smaller, just another rotting skeleton from a forgotten era. Lila gripped the wheel tighter, half expecting to see the windows fill with faces, shadows waving, voices begging for release. But the boards stayed dark, the silence absolute except for the soft murmur of wind through high grass. Dispatch was frantic. "Unit 712, repeat. Do you require medical? We lost you for almost an hour. No radio, no GPS, not even body cam signals. What happened?" Lila caught Ben's eye in the mirror. His nod was tired, but certain. "Negative on medical dispatch. We're clear. Scene secure. We found evidence of a break-in, but house is abandoned. We'll need CSI to document before the city board-up crew comes back out." The lie slid out smooth as water. What else could she say? They waited for backup, the neighborhood waking up around them. Curious faces peered from behind curtains as the sun crested over rooftops. 2 cruisers rolled up, fresh officers stepping out into the dew, eager and skeptical in the way of those who hadn't yet seen what old houses sometimes hid. Ben, hands shaking slightly, led them to the back. House was sealed. "We got inside, responded to a possible disturbance." Then he trailed off, unable to find the words. Lila finished for him, voice level but distant. "We believe the sounds reported were old, residual. The house hasn't been entered since 1964. All doors were locked from the inside. There's evidence in the basement and parlor. A child's locket, a police badge, some objects out of place. You'll want photos before you touch anything." CSI went to work. One tech picked up the tarnished badge, reading the date and name. Patrolman D. Hollis, 1964. Another photographed the locket, its broken chain glinting in the new light. The house was catalogued room by room, the decay and dust now mundane, under digital lenses. No sign of forced entry, no fresh footprints except the officers,
no sign of squatters or vandals. The only strange evidence was how cold the house remained, even after sunrise. As Lila stood in the kitchen, waiting for the evidence team to finish, she felt a subtle shift, a warmth, gentle and fleeting, as if the air itself had grown lighter. For a heartbeat, she imagined the faint scent of lilies and old perfume. Then it faded, leaving only the familiar, comforting chaos of police work. Ben wandered over, his voice pitched low. "You going to tell anyone what really happened?" Lila shook her head, managing a ghost of a smile. "Would you believe me if I did?" He snorted softly. "Nope, but I'll remember every second of it." They rode back to the station in silence, each lost in their thoughts. At her desk, Lila typed up a careful factual report, leaving out the shifting walls, the voices, the visions of a little girl lost in time. She included the badge and locket in the evidence log, each tagged with the date and address. The report went to records, destined to collect dust, another unsolved oddity from a town that had learned, over decades, not to ask too many questions about old houses. That night, Lila drove back down Willow Lane. Before heading home, she stopped just outside the circle of police tape, engine idling. The house sat quietly beneath the moon, windows blank, the boards on the porch dark and unmoving. She rolled down her window, listening. No voices, no music, only the sigh of wind and the distant trill of crickets. Still she found herself whispering, "Good night, Emily," to the silent second-story window. She never saw the little girl's face again, but in the weeks that followed, whenever Lila walked her neighborhood, she'd spot glimpses out of the corner of her eye. A child's red ribbon, a flash of white, a shape in the dusk that looked, just for a moment, like a girl waving goodbye. The locket remained in the evidence locker, cold as ever, its presence a silent promise that the past was never truly gone. Ben put in for the day shift, saying he'd had enough midnight calls. Lila quietly asked to keep an eye on the old houses on her patrol. They never spoke about what had happened in the dark at 48 Willow Lane. Not to their colleagues, not to friends, not even to each other, except for the occasional shared look when a radio crackled late at night, or when a house seemed to sigh as they passed. The neighbors still whispered about Willow Lane, sometimes, especially after a hard rain, or on the anniversary of that long-ago summer night. A light would flicker behind the boards, or someone would swear they saw a woman's face pressed to the glass. Lila would get a call from dispatch, and she'd drive out, knowing what she'd find, a silent sealed house, lost in time. But deep down, she always felt the faintest trace of peace, because whatever haunted the Farnsworth place had finally been seen, and remembered, and let go. And in a world full of unfinished stories, sometimes that was the best you could ever hope for.
Officer Dean Carter leaned against the side of his cruiser, coffee cooling on the roof, watching a fog as thick as wool drift across County Road 8. It was the kind of late shift when nothing should happen, just him, the hum of tires, and the odd coyote call in the cornfields. The dashboard clock blinked 2:14 a.m., the only light for miles, except his own headlights, and the steady red flash of the radio's power indicator. He almost missed the car the first time it passed, a faded blue Buick, barely doing 35 in a 50, weaving just enough to catch his eye. Dean straightened, squinting through the mist as taillights faded around a curve. The car's movement was hesitant, almost uncertain, like the driver was lost or distracted. He flicked his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 22. Got a possible impaired driver eastbound on County 8, just past mile marker 17, blue sedan, looks like a late 90s Buick. I'm going to make a stop." The dispatcher's reply crackled, distant. "Copy 22. Proceed with caution. Let us know if you need backup." Dean slipped behind the wheel, engine purring. He closed the gap in seconds, following the Buick's drifting path past silent cornfields and darkened barns. As he signaled the driver to pull over, the Buick slowed gradually, almost dreamlike, before easing onto the gravel shoulder with an odd, deliberate calm. Dean stepped out, the night chill biting through his uniform, and approached on the passenger side, habit drilled by years of caution. The Buick's windows were rolled up, no movement inside, just the dull blue glow of the dashboard. He tapped his flashlight on the glass. "Evening, sir. County Sheriff's Office. Can I see your license and registration?" The driver didn't move. Dean leaned closer, peering in. The man behind the wheel was middle-aged, dressed in a brown jacket and plaid shirt, both hands fixed at 10 and 2. His head was turned slightly, eyes open, but his expression was blank, almost serene. He looked straight ahead, not blinking, not flinching at the light. Dean knocked again, harder. "Sir, you all right?" Still nothing. He circled to the driver's side, rolling his flashlight over the man's features. The driver's skin was pale, almost bluish in the beam, lips parted, just enough to show a sliver of teeth. There was no fog on the inside of the glass, no condensation, no sign of breath. Dean's own heartbeat quickened. He tried the door. It opened easily, hinges sighing. The interior smelled of dust and cold metal, a faint whiff of something sweet and overripe beneath it. "Sir, I need you to respond." Dean reached in, gently shook the man's shoulder. The body rocked with the motion, but didn't tense or react. Up close, the driver's skin was waxy and cold. Dean swallowed, alarm spiking. He pressed 2 fingers to the man's throat. Nothing, not even the faintest flutter. He checked the wrist, still nothing. His voice felt too loud in the silent night. "Dispatch, this is Unit 22. I need EMS to my location. Possible code blue. Driver unresponsive. No pulse. Still in the vehicle." The reply was immediate, but warped by static. "Unit 22. Say again. Code blue. No pulse. Repeat. Do you need backup?" Dean forced his breathing steady. "Affirmative, dispatch. Send backup to possible deceased person. I'm at County 8, mile marker 17. He leaned in again. The man's eyes were open, glassy, staring straight ahead. Yet as Dean watched, he thought he saw the faintest twitch at the edge of the driver's mouth, a muscle jumping, a trick of the light. He pulled back, rubbing his arms. The interior was cold, far colder than the night air. He scanned the car for clues. The keys were still in the ignition, engine idling so low it was almost inaudible. On the passenger seat sat a battered wallet, driver's license sticking out, along with a folded funeral card. Dean's stomach clenched as he glanced at the name, Richard Allen Gordon. The face on the license was a match. The funeral card was dated 3 days ago. Dean stepped back, heart hammering. The world felt suddenly small and far away. The only sounds the faint tick of the Buick's hazard lights and the wind in the corn. A voice, a whisper, barely more than a sigh, seemed to come from the passenger seat. Dean snapped his head around, but saw only his own pale reflection in the window. He tried the radio again. "Dispatch, what's the ETA on EMS?" The radio hissed, then fell silent. Dean looked at the man in the Buick, fighting the urge to run, to get back in his own car, and never look back. But procedure was procedure. He watched for backup, one hand resting near his holster, the other shining his light on the driver's still, impossibly present form. Somewhere in the distance, a song drifted faintly from the Buick's radio, old warbling, the kind of tune his father used to play on late-night drives. Dean felt the hair on his arms rise as the first line curled through the fog. "See you on the other side." He shivered, not sure if the cold was coming from outside, or from the dead man in the driver's seat, who just for a moment seemed to be listening. Dean forced himself to breathe, as the eerie melody faded into the static of the Buick's ancient radio. He scanned the dashboard, saw the time blinking 2:14, unchanged from the moment he'd looked earlier.
The clock's red digits seemed frozen, the whole car locked in a moment that refused to move forward. He swallowed, shined his flashlight on the driver's face again. The pupils did not contract, the skin around them pallid as marble, but the eyes, he could swear they glistened with awareness. Dean gently shook the man's shoulder once more, half hoping for a gasp, a cough, any sign of the living. Richard Allen Gordon, Dean read softly from the license, watching for the tiniest response. You hear me? Nothing. No breath, no twitch, no flicker, just the faint whine of the idling engine, and that chill leaking from every surface. Dean moved around the car, careful not to disturb the scene more than necessary. In the back seat, he noticed a leather satchel, open at the top, revealing scattered newspaper clippings. He reached for it, then paused as a blast of cold air seemed to ripple over his skin, a draft that could not possibly have come from the tightly sealed vehicle. He took a breath and pulled the satchel into the front seat. The headline stared up at him, missing. Local man disappears after funeral tragedy on County 8. Family mourns Richard Gordon, unsolved accident or something more.
Dean's hand trembled as he flipped through the stack. There were faded photographs, one of Richard with a smiling woman and 2 children, another of a twisted, burned-out sedan at the bottom of a ravine. County Road 8 sign visible in the background. He set the photos aside, heart pounding. According to the articles, Richard Gordon had died right here, on this very road, nearly a week ago. The funeral card said the same. Dean's radio hissed, startling him. Unit 22, backup, en route. EMS is 10 minutes out. Any change in subject's condition? Dean kept his eyes on the driver's unblinking stare. Negative, dispatch. No pulse, no respiration, still seated upright at the wheel. Appears deceased. Will wait for medical and backup. He heard the uncertainty in his own voice. In the background, the Buick's radio fizzled, then clicked on its own. It seemed shifting from static to a low humming voice, as if someone were tuning through dead channels. Then, with a pop, the station settled on a voice, warped and distant, as if coming from underwater. Richard, Richard, it's not over. You have to come home. Dean's blood iced. He leaned in, turning the volume knob, but the voice was gone, replaced by the faint sound of wind and a faraway bell tolling midnight. The clock still read 2:14. Suddenly, the air in the car thickened. Dean's own breath fogged in the cold, even as sweat prickled down his back. He felt eyes on him, dozens of them, crowding the fogged windows, peering in from the cornfields. He spun, flashlight beam, cutting through the mist, but saw nothing except his own pale face, hollow-eyed in the reflection. The phone in the center console vibrated, lighting up the interior with a blue glow. Dean stared. The call was coming from a number labeled home. Instinct warred with dread. He reached for it, thumb hesitating, then answered. The line filled with static, a distant child's voice rising through the noise. Daddy, are you coming home? Dean's throat closed. This is Officer Carter. Who is this? A pause, then, softer. He said he'd come back, but he never does. Why did you stop him? Dean shivered. Is this? Are you talking about Richard Gordon? Static, a low sob, then silence. Dean dropped the phone, his pulse racing. He looked back at Richard, expecting, dreading, a change. The dead man's eyes glinted in the grey light, and Dean was struck by the certainty that in some way he was aware. The engine shuddered, the headlights flickered. The world outside the car seemed to pull back, as if the fog were drawing the road into itself. The temperature dropped further. Frost crept along the windshield from the inside, tracing ghostly shapes, hands, faces, desperate words. The radio flickered again, and now the voice was unmistakable, guttural, and slow, as if coming from a great distance. You shouldn't have stopped me. Dean stumbled back, dropping his flashlight. The dead man's head turned with a creak,
his gaze following Dean's retreat. For a breathless moment, Dean was rooted in place, the world shrinking to the size of the Buick, the road, the cold, and the silent driver, with no pulse, waiting for something he could not name. As the first light of backup flickered dimly in the fog behind them, Dean's heart hammered against his ribs, pulse roaring in his ears, as the world closed in, just him, the Buick, and Richard Gordon's blank, impossible stare. For a second, the fog seemed to eat the light from his backup's headlights, swallowing the road and cornfields, and leaving only a small flickering pocket of existence. Dean forced himself to move, grabbing his flashlight from where it had rolled, under the Buick's door. The radio squawked, Unit 22, status, a familiar voice, Officer Marquez, his backup, mercifully clear, in the static. Dean pressed his shoulder mic, voice tight. Marquez, I'm here. Advise caution, subject is unresponsive. No pulse, no breath, but still upright in the vehicle. He almost added, and he moved, but stopped himself, not trusting his own senses. Marquez's cruiser pulled in behind Dean's, headlights slicing the fog. She got out, boots crunching on gravel, scanning the scene with practiced calm. You look like hell, Carter, she said, her tone a forced bravado. He beckoned her over, keeping one wary eye on the Buick's driver. You ever see anything like this? Marquez shined her own light into the car, her expression morphing from confusion to alarm, as she took in the ashen face, the staring eyes. Christ, he's dead. She leaned in closer, looking for signs of breath, pulse, anything. But he's not even slumped. It's like he's waiting for something. Dean nodded. Look at this. He handed her the funeral card and the clippings. She skimmed them, then glanced back at the man in the seat. That's not possible. This guy's been dead a week. A sudden jolt rattled the Buick. Both officers stepped back, hands going to their holsters. The radio on the dash blared again, this time cycling through static, then an old slow waltz, music warbling with static and age. The dashboard clock flickered. 2:14, 2:14, 2:14. Marquez frowned. What time is it on your watch? Dean checked. 2:29. The car's clock had stopped, stubbornly, refusing to move forward. Inside, the cold deepened. Frost webbed the inside of the windows, the air heavy with the sour tang of wilted flowers and old paper. Marquez's breath plumed in the beam of her flashlight. You feel that? It's freezing. Dean tried to collect himself, focus on procedure. We have to get him out, secure the scene for EMS. He reached for the driver's shoulder again, but as he touched the corpse, a new wave of cold pulsed through his fingers, numbness crawling up his arm. Suddenly, Richard's head jerked toward Dean, neck stiff as a hinge, eyes locking onto his. The mouth moved, cracking open with a brittle, tearing sound. You shouldn't have stopped me. Dean staggered back, tripping over his own boots. Marquez drew her weapon. Sir, can you hear me? Step out of the car. But Richard's face fell slack again, head rolling back against the seat, eyes staring at nothing. For a long pulsing moment, neither officer moved. Then, as if the world snapped back into motion, the headlights of the Buick blinked off and on, illuminating the cornfields in a strobe of sickly yellow. The car's radio, seemingly, with a mind of its own, tuned itself once more. The waltz faded, and a distorted child's voice seeped from the speakers. Daddy, please come home. We're waiting.
Dean shuddered, feeling a cold dread lodge in his bones. Marquez's voice quavered. Carter, what the hell is going on? He shook his head, fighting for rational ground. We're going to search the car, look for anything that tells us what he was doing out here tonight. They found more clues. A stack of postcards addressed to the same woman from the funeral card, his wife, long since buried, the dates stopping 5 years ago. A single photograph was taped to the glove box, edges curled, showing Richard and his family standing in front of a church on a sunny afternoon. On the back, in careful handwriting, see you on the other side. Suddenly, Marquez gasped. Dean, look, In the Buick's rearview mirror, 3 shadowy shapes now appeared in the back seat. The blurred forms of a woman and 2 children, faces indistinct, eyes bright with sorrow and longing. The woman's hand rested on Richard's shoulder, her mouth moving in a silent whisper. Dean's vision spun. He stared into the mirror, and for a split second, his own reflection changed. His face pale, hollow, a bloodless echo of the man in the driver's seat. He jerked away, heart pounding. The air inside the Buick felt heavy, oppressive, as if it were pressing Dean and Marquez back from the edge of something vast and unseen. Marquez, Dean managed. We need to step back, wait for EMS. Whatever this is, it's not for us. They stood outside, breath fogging, the road empty, but for their cruisers and the silent, waiting Buick. In the deepening chill, the only sound was the music, still playing. See you on the other side. Dean watched as Richard Gordon's eyes finally slid shut, a single tear tracing down his cheek. One last message from a life and family forever lost on County Road 8. The road felt farther from reality. With every passing minute, Dean and Marquez stood side by side, barely speaking, each listening to the quiet that had settled over County Road 8, like a burial shroud. Even the chirr of insects and distant coyote cries had gone silent. Dean's breath hung in the cold air, his hands trembling, not from fear of the dead man in the car, but from the sense that something larger, colder, was pressing down around them. Inside the Buick, Richard Gordon sat utterly still, hands slackening at last from the steering wheel. Marquez's flashlight beam wobbled as she took a shaky step forward. He's gone, now, really gone. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Dean nodded, rubbing his arms for warmth, but the evidence of the supernatural still lingered. The frost crawling up the inside of the windows, the fog outside thick as soup, the car clock locked forever on 2:14. The radio played its ancient looping waltz, and sometimes in the music, Dean swore he could hear voices, murmuring, calling names, or whispering fragments of old prayers. He felt drawn to the car again, to the half-open satchel and the objects they'd found. With Marquez close, he paged through the old postcards, reading the yearning in every line. I miss you, come home. It's not the same here without you. He found a folded letter, never mailed, ink faded and shaky. Anna, if you get this, I'm sorry for everything. I keep thinking if I'd left work earlier that night, none of this would have happened. I hear the kids calling sometimes in my dreams. Maybe you do too. I just want to see you all again. The final line was a scrawl. If I don't come back, forgive me. Dean's chest ached. The fog pressed closer, headlights of passing cars nowhere to be seen. Marquez tried her radio. Dispatch, Unit 22, and backup on County 8. We need EMS. Our subject is deceased. Static answered her. For a few seconds, through the crackle, came a voice neither of them recognized. Old formal, as if from a different era. Return to your post, Officer Gordon. Your shift is over. Dean and Marquez exchanged a horrified look. Dean fumbled his own radio. Dispatch, please respond. Suddenly, the Buick's dashboard lights surged. The glove box popped open, and the car's headlights flicked on, slicing through the mist. For just a moment, Dean could see down the endless tunnel of County 8, the road stretching impossibly far, as if it led straight into some gray afterlife. In the beams, the forms of Richard's family seemed to stand on the shoulder, waiting. Anna, the children hands clasped, faces calm, patient. Then the vision flickered and snapped back. Only the empty road remained, headlights now dim. Marquez swore softly, backing away. The radio, almost gently, played the song's refrain. See you on the other side. Dean knelt by the Buick, hand pressed to the cold hood. Richard, is this what you needed? To see them again, or to let someone else see what happened to you? A wind rose suddenly, scattering old newspaper clippings and leaves around the car. The frost melted from the windows. The clock's red digits blinked. 2:15, 2:16, 2:17. Time rolling forward once more. For the briefest moment, Dean felt a presence behind him, a hand, icy and gentle, resting on his shoulder. A whisper brushed his ear. Thank you. He turned, but no one was there.
When he looked into the Buick again, Richard's eyes were shut. His features, for the first time, seemed at peace. Marquez holstered her radio, breathing hard. "We're not going to put any of this in the report, are we?" Dean shook his head, lips tight, but not unkind. "We'll write what we saw. Unresponsive driver, deceased at scene. No evidence of foul play. Backup," and EMS responded. "The rest is for us." The wailing of sirens drifted closer, real and grounding. EMS lights painting the fog red and blue. As they arrived, Dean and Marquez stepped aside, letting the medics do their work. They didn't mention the music, or the voices, or the cold that had lingered in the air. As the paramedics zipped the body bag, Dean caught one last look at Richard's hands. Clutched in one palm was the photograph of his family. The words on the back now smudged but still legible. "See you on the other side." The EMS lead frowned. "That's not standard. He must have really loved them." Dean nodded, saying nothing. He glanced down the road. Already, the sun was rising, the fog burning away. The Buick's radio fell silent. The clock blinked 2:22, matching the morning's true time. The only evidence of the night's haunting was a lingering hush, and a cold that would stay in Dean's bones for years to come.
He and Marquez exchanged a final, silent agreement. Some stories, they decided, belong to the dark and the mist, and to the dead, who sometimes needed a witness before they could go home. Dean Carter sat on the hood of his cruiser, sunrise blushing the fields gold and pink, as EMS finished their report and the tow truck hauled the Buick away. He cradled his coffee cup in both hands, steam swirling in the crisp morning air. Marquez stood a few feet away, arms folded, her eyes locked on the place where the Buick had been, where for a while it had seemed the world itself had frayed, letting through something colder, older, and unfinished. Neither spoke as the medics drove off, taillights dwindling. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It thrummed with memory, with questions too strange for words. The road, so familiar in daylight, felt altered, like a scar that would never quite heal. Dean found himself replaying it all. Richard Gordon's blank, haunted face, the impossible chill, the voices and the radio, the glimpse of the dead family reaching through the fog. He stared at his own pale reflection in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a stranger looking back. Just a tired cop, eyes ringed and red. Marquez finally broke the silence. "You ever gonna sleep after this?" Dean managed a weak smile. "Probably not tonight, or any night I take County 8. She joined him at the hood, voice softer. "You know they'll say it was just shock, exhaustion. They'll read the report and chalk it up to the job getting in your head." He nodded, knowing she was right. The paperwork would say driver found deceased, apparent heart failure, time of death indeterminate, no foul play, nothing about clocks stuck in time, voices from radios, or a corpse moving with purpose. That would stay between him, Marquez, and the restless morning mist. As the first traffic began to hum along County 8, Dean gathered up the last bits of evidence, Richard's wallet, the photograph, the faded funeral card, and put them in a small envelope for the coroner's office. He hesitated over the photograph, thumb brushing the handwritten words on the back, "See you on the other side." For a wild second, he felt as if he was trespassing on the edge of something sacred and sorrowful, a story that had needed an ending. The tow truck operator paused by the cruiser, hat in hand. "Weirdest job I ever had, officer. That car was colder than a meat locker inside, and the radio kept turning on, even after I pulled the battery." Dean exchanged a glance with Marquez, but said nothing. Some truths were for those who had lived them. As the morning warmed, they climbed back into their cruisers. Dean lingered, eyes straying to the empty spot on the shoulder, the mist now thin and transparent, the sun shining through. He remembered the touch on his shoulder, the thank you whispered by a voice not meant for this world. He'd helped Richard Gordon find his family, or at least the peace to move on. A witness for the dead, nothing more, nothing less. In the days and weeks that followed,
Dean tried to make sense of what he'd seen. He dug up old accident reports, pieced together Gordon's tragedy, a late shift at the mill, a busted headlight, a sharp curve, a phone call that went unanswered. He learned that Anna Gordon and the children had died 5 years earlier, a fire that gutted their house just a mile off County 8. Richard's heart had failed not long after. Some locals whispered that he'd never left, that he'd been driving these roads ever since, lost between one world and the next. Dean started taking the long way home, avoiding County 8 on his midnight patrols. Still, sometimes, near the edge of sleep, he'd hear the echo of that song, "See You on the Other Side." On cold nights, his cruiser's radio would flicker, clock blinking to 2:14, frost crawling over the inside of the glass for just a second. And he wasn't the only one. A month after the incident, a rookie cop knocked on Dean's office door, eyes huge. "You ever see anything strange out on 8? He asked. "Last night, I thought I saw a man waving for help, but when I stopped, no one was there, just tire tracks in the mist. Thought maybe you'd know." Dean just nodded, told him to trust his instincts, and to always treat the dead with respect. He didn't say more. Some nights, Dean dreamed of the Buick rolling slow through the fog, of Richard Gordon's face pressed against the glass, pale and still but no longer afraid. Sometimes in those dreams, Dean stood in the road himself, waving at passing cars, waiting for someone to stop and see him, to bear witness to whatever unfinished business kept him there. When he woke, breathless, he wondered if all patrolmen eventually left pieces of themselves out in the dark, on roads where stories refused to end. The legend grew. Truckers and night drivers swapped tales of a sheriff's cruiser parked by the shoulder on misty nights, an officer waving them down, his face oddly pale, unreadable in the gloom. No one ever got a ticket. Some said, if you listened close, you could hear an old waltz playing faintly as you passed. Dean never confirmed or denied the stories, but each year, when autumn crept back, and the fog rolled thick over County Road 8, he'd drive out to mile marker 17, park in the same place, and sit in silence, coffee cooling on the dash, eyes watching the mist, waiting, listening, remembering the night. He pulled over a man who had no pulse, and witnessed a family reunited, if only for a moment, on the other side.